My son stole his late mother's ring to propose to his girlfriend, and now he's refusing to speak to me because I made him give it back. I'm 46. My son Jake is 23. He was a good kid growing up, which is why what he did hit me like a punch to the gut. I also have a daughter, Amber, who's 16. When my wife died during the pandemic, she already had a will in place. She had been immunocompromised for nearly a decade, so she'd prepared everything early. In her will, she split her estate between the kids. Jake got his share immediately because he was already an adult. He used that money as a down payment on his condo. He also received his mother's car. But every single piece of her jewelry was left to Amber. Among those pieces was a vintage gold ring with a diamond in the center and pale blue sapphires on each side. It had been in my wife's family for generations. Her grandfather, a jeweler, made it by hand for her grandmother. When her grandmother passed, it went to her mother and eventually to my wife. After her death, it was meant to go to Amber, exactly as the will stated. Losing my wife broke me, but I held it together for the kids. They were my anchor. That's why my son's betrayal feels like a rusty knife between my ribs. Jake has been dating a girl named Sarah for about 8 months. She's the type who loves jewelry, big, flashy, and a lot of it. One day Jake told her about the heirloom pieces his mother left behind, the ones meant for Amber. And Sarah apparently became obsessed with seeing them. So Jake went into my bedroom when no one was home and showed them to her. He later admitted that to me. I was angry, but I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. A week ago, Jake came to me practically begging to give him that ring, the heirloom, so he could propose. He said Sarah fell in love with it the moment she saw it, and that he was convinced it was the perfect engagement ring. He seemed certain I would be thrilled that he was planning to propose, but I told him this wasn't up to me. The ring belonged to Amber, and I wasn't going to allow him to pressure her into giving it up. I told him he could ask her once, politely, and if she said no, the conversation was over forever. Jake agreed. He asked Amber in front of me. She immediately refused. She wanted to keep the ring in the family. She adored it and always had. To her, it was priceless. The idea of giving it away devastated her. I told Jake that was that, and he needed to drop it. He left upset, but I assumed he'd accept the answer and start looking for a similar ring. But then a few days later, he showed up again while I was at work to talk to Amber again. It escalated into a huge fight. Amber called me sobbing. I phoned Jake and told him to leave my house immediately and stay away from his sister. He yelled that he had as much right to the ring as she does because my wife was also his mother. I reminded him he already received a substantial inheritance. Money, the car, and the jewelry was specifically left to Amber. End of story. He hung up. Amber later texted that he stormed out furious. But then, before I could even get home from work that day, Amber called again, yelling that Jake had come back, gone into my room, taken something, and left without saying a word. When she tried to stop him, he shoved her aside. I rushed home and checked the jewelry box. The ring was gone. I called Jake repeatedly, no answer. I finally texted him and said I would contact the police if he didn't bring the ring back immediately. And even if he'd already proposed, it didn't matter. The ring wasn't his to give. That finally got his attention. He called me crying, saying I couldn't do that because he was my son. I said, "Watch me." He stole the ring, he assaulted his sister, he crossed a line I could not and would not ignore. He called back shortly after and confessed he had already taken Sarah to a restaurant and proposed. The ring had been in his possession for less than an hour, and she was already wearing it. I told him that wasn't my problem. He stole it, and he needed to return it. Whether that ruined his proposal wasn't my concern. I said I would get the ring back one way or another, even if it required a police report and a lawyer. He sobbed, begging me not to destroy his life. I told him he destroyed his own life when he stole from his sister and from his dead mother. The ring needed to be back in our hands by morning, or I would start legal proceedings. The next morning, he actually showed up with his girlfriend. They tried to guilt-trip me. Turns out she knew the ring was stolen and still wanted to keep it because she fell in love with it instantly. I told her she could get a jeweler to make a replica if she wanted it that badly, but the original wasn't hers and never would be. Jake begged again, but Amber and I stood firm. Return the ring, or we're going to the police. Sarah ripped the ring off her finger and threw it at Amber, calling me a vicious bastard before running out of the house in tears. Jake yelled that I probably ruined his relationship. I told him he ruined it himself the moment he decided stealing from his family was acceptable. What kind of son steals from his sister and his dead mother? It's sick. He had nothing left to say and stormed out after her. I haven't involved anyone in this mess, but Jake has. He tried to rally friends and relatives to his side, and instead got the opposite. Everyone tore into him for what he did. I've received messages and calls from people supporting me and Amber. A week has passed and Jake still refuses to speak to me. I sent him detailed photos of the ring in case he wants to have a replica made.
But making an identical copy turned out to be extremely expensive unless they used imitation stones. Jake still hasn't replied to my last message. I have no idea what's happening between him and his girlfriend now, or whether they're still together after everything that happened. But even now, I'm certain he had no right to keep that ring. After this whole disaster, I moved all of my late wife's jewelry to a secure safety deposit box that only I can access. It will stay there until Amber turns 21, maybe even longer, depending on what she wants. I won't risk anything like this happening again. I know I made the right decision by getting the ring back, but that doesn't mean it's easy. I don't want my son to resent me forever, and I don't want our family to turn on him. If anyone has advice on how to fix this situation without returning the ring or spending a fortune on a replica, I'm open to hearing it. Update 1. Well, Sarah officially broke up with Jake. He's devastated and blames me for everything. Some people have already pointed out that I might have overrated my son by calling him a good kid. Maybe he used to be. The person he's become lately is a stranger to me. Whether he always had these traits or whether he just fell under the influence of the wrong woman, I honestly don't know. But it doesn't excuse what he did. After I forced them to return the ring, Sarah supposedly spent several days crying in bed. Then she told Jake she didn't want any other ring. She wanted my wife's ring and couldn't imagine an engagement without it now that she'd worn it, even for just a few hours. Jake tried to get sympathy from everyone, friends, relatives, even Sarah's family, and it completely backfired. Word spread fast, and local drama lovers clung to the story like sharks smelling blood. I didn't even ask for updates, but people kept messaging me anyway, so I knew everything that was going on, even though neither Jake nor Sarah would talk to me. Jake still had the photos of the ring I sent him in case he wanted a duplicate made. He took them to a jeweler. The jeweler said he could try to create a replica from images, but he'd need to examine the original to take proper measurements, estimate the materials, and see the stones up close. Jake hesitated for a while. Then, swallowing his pride, he called again. Sarah was now willing to consider a replica, but only if it was perfect down to the smallest detail. A few days after my first post, they asked me to bring the ring to the jeweler so he could give an exact price estimate. I agreed and took a long lunch break to meet them. I retrieved the ring from the safety deposit box and kept it in my sight the entire time. When Sarah saw it again, her eyes lit up with pure greed. She reached her hand out, asking to just hold it for a minute. I told her no, I wasn't going to risk her running off with it. The jeweler examined it carefully. He said the ring was far more valuable than we had assumed. It was handcrafted by my wife's grandfather in the 1940s, with a large diamond in the center and light blue sapphires on the sides. The band was thick 18-karat gold, and the stones were set in platinum. There were delicate floral engravings all around the ring. Just the gemstones for a replica would cost more than Jake had in savings. The labor alone, entirely by hand, would be extremely expensive. The final price was 5 times more than Jake had ever saved in his life. At best, he could put down a deposit and spend years paying the debt off. Jake was willing to consider cheaper alternatives, including using imitation stones or modern materials. The jeweler even showed us 3 modern rings with similar designs at a reasonable price. But suddenly, Sarah slapped Jake across the face, called him a pathetic broke loser, then turned to me and called me a spiteful bastard again for stealing her ring. She insisted the original belonged to her because Jake used it to propose. She even held out her hand, expecting someone to slide it onto her finger again, and demanded I give it back, claiming Amber didn't really need it. She said, "Your wife's family ring is not going to serve her anyway. She's not even going to propose to anyone. Someone can just buy her another ring someday." That was the moment I lost my temper. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her the truth. My wife's family ring will never be hers. Jake had no right to give it to her, which is why he stole it behind my back. Neither of them ever had any claim to it. I told her that people like her, who think they're entitled to anything they want, are exactly what's wrong with the world. She raised her hand as if to hit me too, but the look on my face must have stopped her. She spun around, screamed something intelligible loud enough to make my ears ring, and stormed out, knocking over a display case on purpose on her way out. Jake stared at me with pure rage, but didn't say a word until I asked why he was even dating someone like her. All he said was that he loved her, then went after her. A few days later, Sarah ended things for good, telling Jake he didn't appreciate her since he couldn't get her the ring she deserved. She also said she couldn't imagine having a father-in-law like me.
She felt utterly humiliated because of me and cried, convinced that everyone now saw her as a gold digger. Honestly, I don't think people were that far off. She slapped my son just because he suggested a cheaper replica of a ring he couldn't afford, and then threw a full-blown tantrum when I wouldn't hand over the original ring the moment she demanded it. That is gold digger behavior. Maybe it's just my opinion, but I doubt Sarah would have stayed with my son if someone wealthier appeared on the horizon. It really seemed like all she wanted was that ring, nothing more. Right after the breakup, Jake tried to get into my house again while I was gone. I have no idea why, but thinking back, maybe he was after the emergency cash in the safe, or thought our family jewelry was still there. I hadn't told him yet that I moved everything to a bank vault. I hated even considering that my own son might break into my home, but he had stolen from us once before, so it wasn't impossible. Someone here advised me to change the locks. I did. Jake's key doesn't work anymore. I'm even thinking of installing security cameras now. Amber called me terrified when Jake showed up. He was pounding on the door, demanding she let him in. I tried calling him, no response. That must have scared him off, because according to Amber, he walked away right after his phone rang. He has a special ringtone set for my number, so he definitely knew it was me. He called me back later that evening. I didn't let him start yelling. I immediately demanded to know why he was trying to break into the house when I wasn't home. He had frightened his sister. She almost called the police. Jake dodged the question and instead began yelling about how I didn't trust him because I changed the locks. I told him, of course I don't trust you after what you did. He shouted that I should just be happy for him and that if his mother were still alive, she'd want him to propose with that ring. That set me off. I told him if she truly wanted that, she would have left the ring to him in her will. Then he started whining that everything was my fault. He repeated all the garbage Sarah had told him, how she called me stingy, how I supposedly didn't think she was good enough for him. I told him he was putting words in my mouth. I barely even knew Sarah and never interfered with their relationship, at least not until he stole the ring. When he tried to argue, I asked him, name one time I ever said something bad about Sarah before the ring incident. He went silent. He couldn't recall anything, because I had hardly seen her at all during their entire relationship. I didn't even know they were dating until they'd been together for 3 months. But that wasn't the point anymore. I asked again why he tried getting into the house. He refused to answer, so I listed the possibilities myself. If he came for the ring or any other heirlooms, too late. Everything is secured elsewhere. If he wanted access to the emergency cash, he'd never get into the safe. And if he came to hurt his sister, I'd deal with him myself. Judging by his silence, I hit at least one nerve. Eventually, he said he was quitting his job, selling his apartment, and moving far away so he'd never have to speak to me again. His final words were, "Enjoy your perfect little daughter." I don't understand how my son changed so drastically in just 1 year. I never called Sarah a manipulative gold digger, only said she had wrapped him around her finger and loved shiny things. Not much difference, I know, but now it's painfully obvious she is manipulative, especially after the dramatic performance she put on trying to keep a ring that never belonged to her. She cried for days over a ring she knew was stolen. Then she exploded when she couldn't keep it or even get a replica. Because of her, my son cut me and his sister out of his life. It hurts. And I'm furious that he chose this path just to please a woman he'd only been dating for 8 months. That's not long enough to talk about marriage. I dated my wife for over 2 years before proposing. And honestly, I can't imagine how disastrous it would have been if Sarah had actually married my son. I know Jake will blame me for a long time. I don't know if we'll ever speak again. I hope we do someday, but right now, we both need distance. Amber is struggling too. She's grateful I got her ring back, but just as shocked as I am at what Jake has become. She calls him a jerk for shoving her aside while stealing the ring. Thankfully, she has plenty of support from me and the rest of the family. Jake has no support left. Relatives have been calling or messaging him to express their outrage. Even his former best friend stopped by to apologize to me. He and Jake had a huge fight over this whole mess, and when that friend refused to take his side, Jake cut him off too. Sarah, Jake's ex, also ran into trouble at home. Her parents contacted me to hear my version and later apologized for her behavior. They only knew part of the story and were horrified to learn the rest. They had always thought she was kind, but said she had changed a lot in recent years and they were disappointed in her. They previously helped her pay half the rent, but said they won't renew her lease once it expires. She can either pay it on her own or find a new place. Now she blames and curses me too. I don't know what's wrong with people these days. When I was Jake's age, people like this were rare. Now they're everywhere, spreading toxicity like a flood. All I can hope is that one day my son wakes up and finds his way back to being the good man he used to be. Whether he ever speaks to me or not, I'll still wish him happiness. Update 2. And please, stop asking me for photos of the ring. A lot of people have messaged me wanting to see it or order a similar one. I told my daughter about these posts, and she's proud of me, but she does not want the ring online. It's hers. I don't need a reason. Her choice is final, and I will respect it.
I'm not thrilled about the idea of posting photos either. If strangers start copying the ring, it'll lose what makes it special. I was fine with my son making a replica that would have stayed within the family, but there's no way I'm putting it online for everyone to duplicate. I deleted the pictures I had sent Jake a long time ago. The ring is stored in a bank vault now. It won't stay there forever. When I can afford it, I plan to buy a proper home safe. Over the weeks since my first post, I installed security cameras around the house, and thank God I did. For everyone asking whether my son got back together with Sarah, no, they're not together. Jake really is selling his apartment and hasn't spoken to me since that last phone call, the one where he wished me a nice life with my precious daughter because he didn't get what he wanted from me. I met with my lawyer and updated my will. I didn't cut him out entirely, but he lost a large portion of what he would have inherited. After everything that's happened, I can't bring myself to feel sorry for him anymore. My daughter Amber called him a simp, and once I looked up what that meant, I realized how accurate it is. But I don't want to stay angry or sad. Neither emotion does me any good. I'm trying to let go and move forward. Jake clearly chose a life without us. Maybe one day he'll realize how wrong he was, but I can't force him to rethink his choices. I ran into Sarah by accident recently. She spotted me at the mall while I was out with a friend. She started yelling across the crowd, calling me a stingy old miser. I didn't have to defend myself. My friend laughed and called her out as a thief and a greedy woman who only wanted my late wife's ring because she couldn't afford anything like it herself. People around us immediately turned to stare. Sarah flipped us off and stormed away, knocking things over, even a small child who started crying. When she realized she had hurt the kid, she sprinted off like she was escaping a crime scene. Later that day, she showed up at my doorstep, screaming that it was my fault her friends now call her a gold digger and won't speak to her. I told her plainly she is a gold digger. She had no right to that ring in the first place, and the way she cried for days over something she knew had been stolen, then dumped my son because he couldn't buy her what she wanted, is classic gold digger behavior. I told her I'd make sure she never sees that ring again. She kept screaming nonsense all the way back to her car. I hoped she'd finally leave us alone, but she didn't. For those who thought drugs were behind her and Jake's behavior, sorry to disappoint, but no. The police reports confirmed she was clean. Whatever's going on with her, it's all her own doing, and apparently Jake's too. Last week, Sarah was arrested for trying to break into my house. The cameras recorded her sneaking into my backyard and trying to hack down my back door with an axe. The alarm went off and she ran, but the front cameras captured her face and her car perfectly. She even dropped the axe with her fingerprints on it. By the time police arrived, she was gone, but they found her later at home. They were only going to arrest her for trespassing and attempted break-in, but she started fighting, so they had to take her down and drag her out. She clearly needs mental help. I spoke with her parents afterward. They offered to pay for the damaged door and told me what they knew. No drugs in her system. Serious mental health issues, yes. They told me they planned to move her out of town once the legal mess is handled. I don't know what happened after that, but honestly, it's not my place to pry. I do feel a little sorry for her. She seems genuinely unwell. I assumed Jake already knew since everyone else was talking about it, but he's completely cut off contact. Not just with me, but with his friends and extended family too. One of his coworkers finally reached out and said Jake is still furious about everything. He insists the ring would have been a small price to pay for his happiness. Now that Sarah is gone, he's switched to blaming her instead, calling her a crazy gold digger who ruined his life. It seems he only knows how to point the finger at others. Until he learns to take responsibility for his own actions, I don't see how we can repair our relationship. He's not going to get anywhere in life if he keeps deflecting blame. I hope some time alone helps him cool down and reflect on the mess he created. Update 3. Most people online have been supportive, but every now and then some random stranger messages me calling me a bad father or a Python psycho. Honestly, these people need a hobby. If their goal is to break me down, it's not working. Though it is annoying, not a single one of them offered a better solution or advice on how I should have handled any of this. They just want to yell at someone. One of them even lost their account, not because of me, but because they were just trolling everywhere. Most recently, someone messaged me from an account created the day before. Maybe it was the same guy. Do these people really have nothing better to do? If anyone has criticism, fine, but at least offer real suggestions instead of calling me a terrible father or a monster. People who only want to argue and insult do nothing to improve the situation. End of update.
They do all of this just to feed their own egos. And honestly, you can tell something's wrong with these people if their only source of entertainment is harassing a widower who's simply trying to hold his family together. Real mature, right? And for those trolls insisting I should have acted differently, let's go over the facts. First, my son showed my late wife's heirloom ring to his gold-digging girlfriend without my permission. Second, I gave him a fair chance to ask his sister for the ring properly, since he wanted it to propose. She refused, and that should have been the end of it. Third, he stole the ring, attacked his own sister, and within an hour slipped it onto his girlfriend's finger like nothing happened. Fourth, I was dragged through the mud for demanding the return of a stolen heirloom that belonged to my late wife and was legally willed to my daughter. Fifth, I even tried to help them get a replica made, but his girlfriend threw a tantrum because she didn't get the original, and my son couldn't afford a proper copy. Sixth, after she dumped him, my son tried to break into my house, likely to steal something else. Seventh, his ex tried to publicly humiliate me and then knocked over a child during one of her outbursts. Eighth, the same ex-girlfriend tried to break down my back door with an axe and was arrested. Ninth, and now my son blames literally everyone except himself, while the only people supporting him are trolls online. If after all of that, I'm still being painted as the villain, then the people writing these messages seriously need their heads checked. Yes, I changed the locks. That's a normal reaction when someone breaks into your home, even if that someone is your own son. No, I wasn't trying to escalate anything. Jake and Sarah escalated it on their own. I wanted to talk things out calmly, but all they did was demand what they felt entitled to. And I wasn't going to pay for their replica either. When my wife passed away, my son inherited over $50,000 and his mother's car. My daughter inherited the family jewelry. That seems perfectly fair to me. My son used all the money as a down payment on a nice apartment. And for the record, I paid for his college, and I'll pay the same for my daughter when her time comes. I don't have a favorite child, but sometimes people behave horribly, and you just can't fix that for them. Someone told me my son probably packed up and left because his pride won't let him admit he's wrong. He wants a fresh start somewhere no one knows him. I can understand that on some level, but it doesn't change the fact that he dug this hole himself. Now I have a son who hates me for the consequences of his own actions. Relatives and friends message me constantly about him, even though I never asked. Meanwhile, my daughter is terrified he'll come back and hurt her. I'm already arranging therapy for her as soon as possible. I installed a full home security system with cameras. That decision already paid off. His ex-girlfriend tried to break down my back door. I tried to help my son become a better person without enabling him, but he rejected every attempt and shoved my hand away, figuratively and literally. So tell me, trolls, how does any of this make me a monster? Final update. My son just left town. I hoped the drama would finally end, but it didn't. Yes, Jake sold his apartment, no idea for how much, but he probably made a decent profit. Last Saturday, he loaded everything he could into his car and drove off. Rumors never died down, so the whole town knows what he did. At one point, Jake almost got into a fight at a bar after someone confronted him publicly. I tried to visit him one last time, to talk, maybe reconcile before he moved away. By then I'd realized leaving town was probably the best thing he could do. His reputation here was completely destroyed. But when I knocked, he refused to open the door. I told him I just wanted to talk, but he yelled through the door that I ruined his life and there was nothing to discuss. Then he went quiet, only to suddenly bring up the ring again, saying I should have just let Sarah keep it or helped pay for the replica. Then he said it didn't matter anymore because Sarah turned out to be unstable and they broke up for good, and he didn't want anything to do with me or his sister ever again. That made me snap. I told him his behavior was unacceptable. He attacked his own sister and stole from his own family. He was lucky I never called the police. Everyone who knew what he did took my daughter's side. When the entire town thinks you're wrong, that's a pretty massive red flag. I told him to stop this performance fueled by his pride. Whether it was grief for his mother, or the fact that he's now the same age I was when he was born, or something else, I didn't know. But he knew he was wrong and refused to admit it, and I was done covering for him. He never spread rumors about the ring. He and Sarah did that. I'm tired of being blamed for the mess he created himself. Only narcissists and cowards behave like that. His mother and I raised him better, and he knows she would never have approved of this, but she's not here to tell him. If you steal something that isn't yours, you don't get to blame the owner for wanting it back. He went silent for a few seconds, then yelled, "Screw you, Dad." I heard him crying and breaking things inside. A neighbor at the end of the hallway peeked out and quickly hid again, so that little scene will definitely spread as gossip too. He refused to say anything else, so I left. But as I was exiting the building, a police car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out and asked for my name. When I told them, they said someone reported that I was trying to break into an apartment. I explained that I'd been arguing with my son through the door and never tried to force my way in. I only knocked. I told them the entire story, mentioned the neighbor who saw and heard everything, and reminded them the building had security cameras. One officer went upstairs to talk to the neighbor. The other put me in handcuffs.
He was very polite and explained that the handcuffs were just a precaution, since they still didn't know who was telling the truth. I told him I understood he was just doing his job, and he let me sit on a nearby bench. After about 10 or 15 minutes, hard to tell since I couldn't check my watch, the officer who went inside radioed back that the neighbor's story mostly matched mine. Several other neighbors also confirmed hearing our conversation through the door. Then he said he would check the security footage, which took even longer. Since I still couldn't see the time, all I could do was sit and wait. The kind officer turned on the radio on his phone so I wouldn't be completely bored. Eventually, the second officer radioed again and told his partner to take off the handcuffs because the cameras backed me up. The audio wasn't great, but it was clear enough to show that I never tried to break into the apartment. Once I was uncuffed, the 2 officers talked quietly for a moment. Then they asked if I really was the father whose son had stolen the ring that belonged to his late mother. I admitted it and asked how they knew. They said the story had already been going around the station, and once they heard my version, everything clicked. One officer said he had been on duty the day Sarah was arrested and described how she acted like a wild animal, trying to bite people and screaming threats like, "Do you know who my parents are? I'll have you all ruined." His wording was much harsher than that. I could only stare at the ground in embarrassment. The officers told me to go home and suggested I avoid coming back. I nodded and left. As I walked away, I noticed them going back into the building, probably to talk to Jake. I'm certain he was the one who called the police because later some of his neighbors messaged me online saying the officers had chewed him out for a false report so badly that he nearly cried. They also reminded him about the ring incident and said his behavior was pathetic. Judging by the timeline, Jake must have exaggerated heavily because the police showed up almost immediately after we started talking through the door. He's lucky he didn't get arrested for wasting their time. When I got home, my daughter Amber comforted me. She said I did everything I could and that it wasn't my fault Jake turned into a jerk. Still, it hurt. Maybe I've lost my son forever. I took the next day off work, shut myself in my office, played Dragon Warrior on my NES emulator, and ate vanilla ice cream just to calm down. Jake left town over the weekend. Maybe I'll never see him again. But if I do, I hope he realizes I've always cared about him. Yes, he treated me horribly, but I'm still his father. If he knocked on my door tomorrow wanting to talk, I'd let him in. I just hope it won't take 10 or 12 years for that day to come. Some people asked how big our town is if rumors spread so fast. It's not tiny, more like slightly below average in size. The reason gossip traveled so quickly was my wife's enormous and tight-knit family. They're everywhere in this town, no exaggeration. I could bump into one of them just going for a walk or buying groceries, and many of them loved to gossip. When Jake started looking for support from relatives online, that lit the fuse. First, they told him exactly what they thought of his behavior, and then they repeated the story to everyone they knew. The situation spun out of control before I even realized what was happening. Jake got his 15 minutes of shame, and it should have ended there. But his ex, Sarah, made everything worse by telling the story to absolutely everyone, trying to get sympathy. That doubled the drama, and soon both of them had lost all their friends. People I had never met started messaging me, even though I never shared my contact information anywhere. No idea how they found me, but at this point it doesn't matter. Now that Jake has left town, things are finally calming down. Within the first week or two, I managed to convince most relatives to delete their posts about Jake, but the damage was already done. I begged people to stop spreading the story. I didn't want attention. I just wanted life to go back to normal. But everything Jake and Sarah did only made the mess bigger. Some also asked about the guy who recognized Jake in the bar and confronted him. From what I heard, he was a neighbor of one of Jake's ex-friends, so it's no surprise he knew what Jake looked like. And yes, even at my age, I still love old video games. It's my little way to relax. My kids never cared for them, and my wife didn't like them either, so it's always been my personal hobby. I don't play often. Maybe once or twice a year, I speed run Dragon Warrior using cheats, because I've never been a great gamer and probably never will be. I refuse to let my husband's brother move in with us, the same man who once peed on my belongings and tried to blame my cat for it. I'm 29, my husband Ted and I have been together for 10 years. We met back in college and have been inseparable ever since. I graduated earlier than him and took a semester off to travel while he finished his studies because we were planning to move to another state afterward. But Ted had to retake several classes, so when I returned, we couldn't move yet, and I didn't have my own place. I moved in with him and his roommate, who also happened to be his older brother, Ash. He's 32. Before I moved in, I made sure Ted talked to Ash about me bringing my cat. They already had an old dog, but Ash said it was fine. About 3 weeks after I moved in, I started noticing a strong smell of urine in our bedroom. We couldn't figure out where it was coming from. My cat is perfectly litter trained, so I knew it wasn't him. The dog couldn't go upstairs due to joint problems, so that wasn't possible either. Then I started finding clothes on the floor that smelled like pee. I asked Ted about it, but he said he had no clue. After 3 miserable months of this, someone was still peeing on my clothes twice a week. I asked Ash if he'd been bringing the dog upstairs, and he denied it. By that point, I was at my limit. I started keeping everything tidy, but I still found urine in my shoes, on pillows, and even decorative items. One day, after I completely broke down in tears, Ted suggested maybe my cat was marking territory, since the urine was only on my things and it was a new environment. But anyone who's ever had a cat knows that cat urine smells nothing like human urine. I knew it wasn't my cat. So I set up a hidden camera in our bedroom. I was paying rent, and Ted knew about the camera, so I figured it was the best way to find out what was really going on. And the footage showed Ash sneaking into our room and peeing on my stuff. When I saw the video, I packed my things and my cat and went to stay with a friend until Ted finished school. After that, we moved out. When the truth came out, I refused to talk to Ash. He disgusted me. Ted handled all communication with him. Since then, I've barely interacted with him. He was one of the groomsmen at our wedding, but we stay away from each other at family gatherings. During the pandemic, Ash lost his job and apartment. Now he's struggling financially and asked if he could stay with us. And honestly, I don't want him anywhere near me. The man was 25 when he did that, a fully grown adult. Now Ted's entire family is calling and texting me saying I'm heartless for leaving him homeless during a pandemic. But they weren't the ones whose clothes he peed on. I was. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should let it go. But every time I think about it, I just can't. I know I'm right. I have every reason to not want him in my home. But even Ted is starting to say he can't just abandon his brother, especially since the job market here is better for his field. For context, yes, Ash went to therapy after the incident. His mom made him go. That's when we learned why he did it. Apparently, Ted and Ash had always been very close, and Ash saw me as a threat who was stealing his best friend, so he thought doing something that awful would drive us apart. Instead, it only made Ted stop talking to him completely for a long time. The therapist later suggested they make amends, and Ted's mom helped them reconnect, but it was agreed that I'd never have to speak to Ash again or let him into our home. As for the wedding, it was mostly for our parents. We would have been fine with a small ceremony, but since I was the first of my sisters to get married, my family wanted something big. All my sisters were bridesmaids, and all of Ted's brothers, including Ash, were groomsmen. I didn't have to talk to him or take pictures with him, so I didn't care. Why can't another family member take him in? Because we live on the East Coast, and the rest of the family is on the West Coast. Ted's job opportunities are much better here, so moving is not an option. I'm even trying to convince his brothers, there are 8 of them, to pitch in and help Ash stay over there. Ted's family has this forget and forget mentality. They overlook things I find appalling, like stealing cars, forging degrees, and misusing money. So of course they think Ash's behavior was a one-time mistake. Did he ever apologize? Only to Ted, never to me, and that still hurts. I even considered forgiving him, but I realized it would only open the door for him to come back into my life, and I can't risk that. Did he pay for the stuff he ruined? No. I didn't even know it was him at first. I just washed my things. After I saw the footage, I threw out everything that had been soiled, except for 2 pairs of shoes I still haven't replaced. Ted, bless him, is the best man I know. When this all happened, he was shocked and completely cut off his brother. Later, after their mom and the therapist pushed him to reconcile, they made peace, but Ted never once pressured me to forgive Ash or let him in. He told me it's okay if I never want to see his brother again. And honestly, I love Ted enough to tolerate Ash's presence only when absolutely necessary, like on holidays or big family events. But that's it. I will never live under the same roof as that man again.
Update 1. Each part of this story was written at different times over the past few days. So, as many of you suggested, I showed the post to Ted. After reading the comments, he realized that he'd been wrong, not just toward me, but in how he'd let his family treat me. He apologized over and over, saying he should have done more back then, stood up for me, set boundaries, and demanded better behavior from his brother. He made it clear that Ash moving in with us was absolutely out of the question. Ted also reached out to people in his professional field to see if there were any job openings for Ash. One of his contacts happened to work at the same company where Ash had been employed, and here's what Ted found out. Ash hadn't been fired, he just left voluntarily. But his job was still open for him if he wanted to come back. Ted decided to drive over and talk to him in person while I was at work. We live a couple of hours away from Ash. For context, I work 2 jobs, one from 4 p.m. to midnight and another part-time during the day. Not because Ted can't support us, but because I actually like what I do and it keeps me busy and happy. But when Ted got to Ash's place, he found something that triggered a chain of events and revelations that honestly left me more sad than angry. Yeah, I know, people will probably call me spineless again, say I should be furious, but I'm just so tired. I just want to sleep. Still, I feel like I owe you all closure after so many of you reached out, whether kindly or harshly. This is the shorter version of what's happened since my first post. Let's start with Ted's brothers. There are 10 of them. Brother number 1, doctor, military background, wife, 3 kids. Brother number 2, surgeon, wife, 2 dogs, a bearded dragon. Brother number 3, engineer, engaged, 1 dog.
Brother number 4, teacher and researcher, wife, 1 child. Brother number 5, works in IT, married. Brother number 6, doctor, single, open to meeting someone. Brother number 7, chef or businessman, wife, 1 child. Brother number 8, car salesman, wife, 3 kids, aquarium fish. Brother number 9, accountant, wife, 1 cat. Brother number 10, Ash. If I say wife X, I mean the wife of that brother, not that they have multiple wives. Anyway, Ted and I talked about everything you pointed out. He apologized, we cried together, promised to be better, and decided to see therapists separately. If both our therapists recommend couples therapy later, we'll do that too. Now, back to the situation. Ted's contact confirmed that Ash hadn't actually been fired, he just left. That made Ted furious, so he went to Ash's house to confront him. Ash wasn't home, but Ted had a spare key for emergencies, so he went in and waited. At one point, he needed to use the bathroom, but the guest one was locked, so he went into Ash's room to use his. That's when he found a situation. That's how he phrased it when he called me. Ted phoned me and said I should stay home, that he'd be back later because he had to involve his family and didn't want to burden me with more chaos. My stomach dropped, but I just said, please be careful and come home soon. 2 hours later, wife number 8 called me crying, asking if I was okay. I said I was fine, but hadn't heard from Ted, except for a vague message about a situation. She asked if I wanted to know what was going on. I said yes. She started apologizing and said that none of them had known the full story. Apparently, brother number 5 read my post and called brother number 7 to complain that I'd aired family laundry online. But when your brother-in-law literally pees on someone's belongings, it's not exactly a common enough story to confuse with another family. Brother number 7 read the post and thought some details didn't add up, so he called brother number 2, who then called his mom, and by that point the entire family had read it. I'd missed a few calls from brother number 2 and brother number 6, but I was at work and didn't answer. And here's what came out next. The whole therapist story about Ash, fake. The so-called therapist was actually just a friend of his pretending to be one. No license, no education, nothing. He pretended for 3 years just to get his mom off his back. She knew. She covered for him. Said she'd forgiven worse things from the other sons. It all came out when brother number 2 asked her why Ash had never apologized to me. They all assumed he already had, and that I'd forgiven him since I have a reputation for being too soft. Plus, they thought he'd only done it a few times, not over the course of several months. Anyway, wife number 8 told me that brothers number 3, 4, and 8 were already driving to meet Ted because he'd called for help. That freaked me out. She suggested I talk to wife number 1 for emotional support. Then Ted called again, saying he was sorry and that his brothers were handling it. I told him to stop sugarcoating things and tell me what was really going on. That's when he said it. Ash has serious psychological issues. He hates me. In his bathroom, there are pictures of me covered in urine and semen. And apparently, there were photos of brother number 1's 14-year-old daughter, too. I have no idea what she ever did to deserve that. Ted said he searched Ash's bedroom and found old family photo albums that should have been with their parents. Inside, the faces of certain people, ours, were cut out, scratched, or vandalized. When he found one of our wedding photos, yellowed and soaked in urine, he dropped the album in disgust. Then he saw Ash's cat hiding under the bed, terrified and filthy. When he coaxed her out, she was covered in dried urine and semen. Ted called brother number 6, told him what he found, and said they needed to take the cat to a vet immediately. Brother number 6 told him to stay put until they figured out where Ash was. The brothers started coordinating,
Brother number 1 was furious and threatened to kill Ash over the photos of his daughter. The rest were between anger and panic. Then Ted called his mom to confront her about covering for Ash. She broke down crying and admitted she'd known the brothers had bullied Ash when they were younger and that she felt guilty for never protecting him. So she tried to make it up to him by constantly defending him as an adult. Ted remembered how when we got married, his mom hovered around Ash constantly. We thought it was just her being caring, but now it all made sense. After she confessed, Ted called me again, apologized, and told me everything. I was so shaken, I called my boss and took the rest of the day off. I just couldn't function. I decided to drive to him because someone had to look after the cat. He told me not to come, said I shouldn't see what he saw, but I couldn't sit still. About an hour into the drive, I got a notification from our smart doorbell, a delivery. It was a bouquet of sunflowers, Ted's favorite flowers. I asked the delivery guy to read the card out loud. They were from Ash. The card said something like, "She set me up by airing our problems. Whatever happens next, it's her fault." I had to pull over and cry. I asked my neighbor to take the flowers, throw them away, and send Ted a photo for evidence. Then I drove to my sister's because I had no idea what else to do. I'm devastated. I loved this family. I thought they loved me back. Now I feel like I've lost them all. I'm terrified for my husband, and even for Ash, though he terrifies me. I don't know what's going to happen next. Ted's brothers eventually found Ash. There were shouting, fighting, and eventually an ER visit. Ash is now under psychiatric supervision. Ted's mother keeps trying to contact me. I don't know if it's to apologize or to get updates, but I'm done with her. Sadly, Ash's cat didn't make it. The vet discovered severe kidney damage that couldn't be treated. The clinic even called the police when brother number 4 brought the cat in, suspecting abuse. It's all such a nightmare. Ted has cut contact with about half of his family. I hope it stays that way. We're both in therapy now, trying to rebuild ourselves. I know I'll never get an apology, and maybe that's for the best. All I know is, no one from that family will ever live in my house again, under no circumstances.
Update 2. Hi, everyone. I want to start by saying thank you, truly, for the overwhelming support, kindness, and love I've received from complete strangers online. Your words, messages, and compassion mean more than you can imagine. I promise I'll start replying soon. It's just, the past few days have been incredibly hard. My therapist told me to keep writing, to organize my thoughts and process what's happened. So since some of you are still following my story, I guess these posts have turned into a kind of journal for me. It's been almost 2 weeks since I opened Pandora's box, meaning since I refused to let my husband's brother move in with us. And you all know what happened after that. I'll forever be grateful to everyone who helped me see that some things need to be discussed, even if doing so turned my entire life into chaos. A lot of you asked similar questions, so I'll answer the main ones here. Right now, I barely speak to anyone except brother number 6. He's always been my favorite, the most kind-hearted and level-headed of them all. Honestly, we should have followed his example from the beginning and kept some distance from the family. He's been the most supportive through everything, and he even apologized for all the crap that went down. I talked to brother number 1 and his wife. I offered help in any way I could, but they politely declined, saying I'd already done enough. I'm not sure if that was sincere or just polite distance, but either way, I'm staying out of their orbit for now. Most of the other brothers apologized too. A few of them admitted their mistakes, both in this situation and in the past. Honestly, this family is going to keep a whole generation of therapists in business. I suggested therapy for all of them because, even though I might have been the trigger, this goes way deeper than me. Now, about my mother-in-law. Some people wrote that maybe she's been a victim of manipulation and abuse her whole life. I'm not denying or confirming that. It's not my place.
What I do know is that she's had a rough life, but after everything that happened, we'll never speak to her again. She called us screaming that we destroyed her family. Her exact words to my husband were, "I worked for years to keep this family together. I forgave everyone for everything they ever did. And this is how you repay me? By letting some bitch tear us apart?" So yeah, that bridge is gone. Ted's coping the best he can. He's in therapy too, working through his guilt and grief. He keeps apologizing even though I know none of this was his fault. He said that what his best friend and brother did to me will haunt him for a long time. We've been reading some of your comments together. He's thankful for everyone who sees him as someone trying to make amends, but he says he hasn't earned forgiveness yet. He believes it will take years to truly make things right. He even told me that he'd understand if I wanted a divorce, that he couldn't live with himself knowing what his family did to me. But I told him no, I still love him deeply, and I know he isn't responsible for what happened. We'll see how therapy goes for both of us. Where's Ash now? He's still under psychiatric supervision. He's asked to see Ted, but Ted refuses. He did send him a letter, though. I don't know what's in it, and I don't want to. Ted assured me that I'll never have to see Ash again. Once doctors deem it safe, he'll be transferred to the West Coast, where the rest of the family can deal with him. Brother number 3 is currently overseeing his condition and agrees it's best to keep him far away from us. Ted still discusses the medical updates with him, but I stay out of it, and that's perfectly fine by me. Following your advice, Ted and I took a break. I quit one of my jobs and switched to remote work for the other. We've been staying at my dad's seaside apartment while Ted's on leave. His boss has been very understanding. It's mid-January now. The weather is gloomy, but the ocean view helps calm my mind. Being far from all that madness has been healing. I also changed my phone number so Ted's family can't reach me anymore. And honestly, it's the best decision I've made. It's just me, Ted, and our cat here. I filed for a restraining order against Ash. I'm not sure what legal steps brother number 1 is taking for his daughter, but I know he made her delete her social media accounts. If there are further actions, that's their call. We're moving soon, not sure where yet, but both of us know that our current house no longer feels like home. Over the next few weeks, we'll start looking for a new place closer to my family. As for what was in the locked guest bathroom, sorry to disappoint, but there were no body parts or horror movie scenes. It was just more of the same stuff they'd already found in the main bathroom. I don't think Ash is some serial killer in the making. He's just a severely disturbed man with self-destructive coping mechanisms and deeply unhealthy attachments. One commenter suggested he might have some deep-rooted hatred or distorted view of women, and honestly, I agree. All of his disturbing behavior was directed at women. Me, his niece, and even his cat, Sunny. But again, I'm not a professional. How am I doing? It depends on the day. Some days are easier, some aren't. I have therapy sessions every other day. And thank you to those who suggested bringing white noise or headphones into the bathroom. It's actually helped a lot. My sisters take turns visiting me, so I'm rarely alone for long. Many of you asked what Ash's childhood was like. What could have caused this? These are Ted's words. When you grow up with 8 older brothers, you become an easy target for criticism, comparisons, and impossible expectations. When the older ones needed somewhere to unload their frustration, Ash was the weakest, the one they picked on. I'm not excusing anything, but there were things even I couldn't protect him from. Now, as an adult, I see how messed up it all was, and so do my brothers. We each have our own demons to fight. We didn't have a supportive family. Everything was swept under the rug instead of being addressed. It left us broken, unable to tell right from wrong. Some of us got better, thanks to our partners, jobs, and experience, but we still have a long way to go. We can't undo the past. All we can do is acknowledge it and try to be better tomorrow. Why didn't anyone check on his cat sooner? Because there was no reason to suspect anything. Sunny was never a very social cat, so during lockdown video calls, it made sense that she wasn't visible. We weren't visiting anyone during the pandemic, so we had no idea what was happening in his home. Before that, everything seemed fine. Him, the house, the cat. I truly don't know what signs we could have seen or how we could have prevented all this. And I'm so sorry for failing that innocent animal. The guilt of not being able to help her will stay with me forever. Some asked how 3 of Ted's 10 brothers managed to fly across the country so quickly to help. Well, there weren't always 10 brothers. And as for how they managed it, I don't know what to say. They realized how serious the situation was, took time off to leave, and came to help. Their wives handled things at home. That's all there is to it. People also ask how no one noticed anything earlier. Honestly, that's a question for Ted's family. I'm not close with them anymore. Ted says he didn't notice any signs, but admits his closeness to Ash might have blinded him to the truth. So that's my life right now. I'm tired, I'm sad, things still feel heavy, but I have a great therapist who keeps reminding me that I'm safe, that I'm okay, and that healing will take time. Sorry for the long update. And thank you, truly, for your kindness and for taking the time to read about my mess. Edit. I realize I caused confusion earlier. When I mentioned Ted having 10 brothers, I didn't mean there were only sons. It's not my story to fully tell, but from what I know, there were 3 sisters too. 2 died in childhood from health complications, which explains the big age gap between the older brothers and Ted and Ash. The 3rd sister's story is more complicated. She was born between brother number 4 and number 5. And yes, they had a lot of kids. They don't believe in contraception. Sorry again for the mix-up.
Update 3. Hey everyone. It's been about 2 months since all this chaos started. During that time, I've gotten tons of messages and comments asking for an update, most of them kind and supportive. Of course, there were a few nasty ones too, but at this point, I've made peace with the fact that it's just part of internet culture. First off, sorry it took me so long to write this. I know many of you are curious about what's been happening with Ted's family, but I really needed time to process everything. Anyway, here's another miserable little piece of the puzzle so you can finally get some closure. So, Ted asked me to move out for a while. He's been struggling a lot emotionally and said my presence was only making things harder for him. He's drowning in guilt, and dealing with all those skeletons from his family's closet is too heavy for anyone. We're not officially divorced, but we're not looking for a new place together either. We're still in the process of selling our old house. Ted's living there, and I've been staying with my parents. I honestly don't know what will happen once the house is sold or what he really wants, but I promised to give him space. He did allow me to post this update, though, because despite some hateful messages, most of you have been incredibly kind and supportive. Now, as promised, here is the updated version of Ted's family tree, including the sisters. Brother number 1, doctor with a military background, married, 3 kids. Brother number 2, surgeon, married, has 2 dogs and a bearded dragon. Brother number 3, engineer, engaged, 1 dog. Brother number 4, teacher and researcher, married, 1 child. Sister number 1, deceased. Brother number 5, works in IT, married, not many details. Brother number 6, doctor, single, open to dating. Brother number 7, chef or businessman, married, 1 kid. Brother number 8, car salesman, married, 3 kids, and some fish. Sisters number 2 and 3, both deceased. Brother number 9, married,
possibly divorced now, 1 cat. Brother number 10, Ash. Now, about the sisters. I only mentioned them this time because, well, the family story is already insane, and this just adds another layer. I didn't include them earlier because Ted never talks about them. For him, they've simply never existed. All 3 sisters were born and passed away before Ted was even conceived. So in his mind, he only has brothers. You guys came up with some wild theories, some surprisingly close to the truth, some totally unhinged, but honestly, given what we know about this family, a bit of insanity seems to run in their blood. Anyway, no, the sisters weren't murdered. Sisters number 2 and 3 were twins who died shortly after birth due to a developmental defect. Their lungs never fully formed. That's all Ted knows. I don't talk to his family anymore, so I can't confirm more details. Sister number 1 died in a motorcycle accident. One of the brothers was driving, underage and drunk. I didn't mention this before because it wasn't my story to tell. It had nothing to do with my situation, and I still believe people deserve privacy, so I'm not saying which brother it was. Many of you also asked about the dark secrets Ted's mother supposedly forgave her sons for. I'll share only what's been openly discussed before. I won't name which brother did what, except for brother number 7, since I already told his story. So, here's what I know. Brothers 1 to 4 were the classic golden boys. Smart, athletic, high-achieving. That set the bar ridiculously high for the younger ones. The family expected every child to excel in school, sports, get a scholarship because paying for 10 college educations wasn't realistic, and build a successful career. But brother number 7 wanted none of that. He's a smart guy, but thought it was unfair that his life had to be a constant competition with his siblings. After high school, he told his parents he was going abroad to study culinary arts. His scholarship supposedly covered part of his tuition, but not housing. His parents were thrilled. Their son was going to become a world-famous chef. They agreed to help with expenses as long as he kept good grades and cooked at family gatherings. In reality, he moved to New York, shared an apartment with 4 roommates, and pretended to live abroad. This was before video calls were common, so it wasn't hard to pull off. He just needed to call his parents at times that matched the time zone difference. He even made up stories for family holidays. His parents sent him money for tuition and rent, but he invested it and eventually made a decent profit. Years later, he returned to the West Coast, claiming he was managing restaurants. The truth came out only when one of the nieces said she wanted to apply to the same school and asked him about it. By then, he was already financially stable, so there weren't major consequences. And to be fair, the man can really cook. He still handles Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. Now for the rest of the family drama. Things I learned from Ted, his mom, or the brothers themselves, and for which none of them were ever punished. Stealing and completely wrecking at least 2 cars, same brother, both times. Another brother also stole a car. Leaving their grandmother alone for a week, even though they were supposed to care for her. Stealing and selling things from their own home. Fist fights that ended with police involvement. Other fights that didn't involve police but did end up with hospital visits. Skipping major school events, stealing trip money or pocketing class funds, public nudity, indecent behavior, and urinating in public, apparently a family tradition. One stalking incident that ended with a restraining order. Frequent teenage drinking and underage drunk driving. As for their father, last time I saw him, he was in an urn on their mother's mantle, hopefully still there. In life, he was an awful, misogynistic, abusive husband and father. Somehow, though, he managed to act like a decent grandpa. And before anyone judges, why did you let the kids near him? That's not on me. I don't have children. Ted's siblings do. Ted's parents were, and his mother still is, very traditional. They only ever cared about appearances, the image of a perfect family with proud sons and beautiful daughters. I'm not excusing them, but losing their daughters really broke them and the whole family dynamic. As for why they had more kids after that, they desperately wanted another girl. They tried twice more, then couldn't have children anymore. I don't know if they would have kept trying or if the infertility made things worse emotionally. As for Ash, I honestly don't know how he's doing. I'd love to say I don't care, but I do a little. Therapy has made me more empathetic, and I can see that he's a sick person. I just hope he gets better. Far, far away from me. And that's pretty much everything I can tell you about Ted's family. Big shout out to brother number 6, though. He's been supportive throughout all of this. Still single, by the way, and made me promise to mention that. So, if anyone on the West Coast is looking for a kind, attractive doctor from an absolutely bonkers family, here's your chance. As for me, things are still rough. I had to quit my second job after already leaving the first one. So, yeah, I'm unemployed and living with my parents right now. But my dad says he doesn't care as long as I'm okay, and I love him for that. I'm still going to therapy. It's the one thing keeping me grounded these days.
Update 4. Over the past year, I've written so many drafts of updates, some funny, some sad, a few drunken, but never posted any of them. I was waiting for the right ending to this entire saga. But now I understand. Real life doesn't have perfect endings. Things always keep happening. I just hope that, for all of us, this really is the end of the story, that I can finally move on, and that you'll all get some sense of closure, too. I also hope that writing this will bring me a little peace. I'm finally in a place where I can open up without being weighed down by guilt for staying silent so long. It honestly means a lot that so many of you kept checking in on me, sending kind messages, and caring. It feels surreal that almost a year has passed, and yet I still get sweet DMs from strangers wishing me happiness. If I didn't reply, please know I read every single message, and they warmed my heart. It's comforting to know there are still so many good people in the world, wishing well to someone they'll never meet. I'll admit, part of me is always scared to post updates. On one hand, there are real-life consequences. People have already managed to figure out who I am. On the other hand, every time I write one, it feels like drawing a line under something painful, and part of me wants to keep pretending it never happened. My therapist says that's not a healthy way to cope, which is why I'm here again. It's wild to think that all of this started just a few days after last New Year's. I still remember Ted and me curled up on the couch, wishing for 2021 to be full of adventures and new experiences. Well, wish granted, I guess. I'll be a lot more careful with what I wish for next time. I honestly don't even know what I'll do this New Year's. Maybe I'll take a small trip somewhere, just something to clear my head. What I don't want is to sit on the couch and replay everything in my mind again. Though I have to admit that couch was ridiculously comfortable, and I do miss it. I love Ted. A part of me probably always will. We spent so much of our lives together. He was my person. It still feels surreal that he's no longer in my life. In short, he asked for a divorce, just like that. It was as gentle a breakup as one can possibly have in our circumstances. We both cried through most of it. He kept calling, apologizing. I begged him not to leave. But as much as it hurt, I knew deep down that he needed this to heal from everything that happened. We're still friends. We were best friends for so many years that even if the romantic part is gone, there will always be a bond. I know you're not here to read about my broken heart, though. You want the messy family updates. So I'll share what I know. Just note that since Ted and I are no longer together, I don't have every detail. I'll break things down by sections for clarity, not in chronological order, but organized by people. My former family. Brother 8. Married, 3 kids, a cat, and now a few fish, too. I haven't heard from them since the divorce, but before that, I know they adopted a kitten named Bob. Brother 7. Married, 1 child. No clue what's going on there. Haven't asked, haven't been asked. Brother 6. No longer single. He's dating someone amazing. His new girlfriend actually found my story on this very forum and still loves him, despite his chaotic family background. We've met a few times over the past year. She's truly wonderful. Sure, there are occasional family tensions, but overall, they're doing great. Brother 6 was also the one who came to see me right after Ted asked for the divorce. He hugged me and said I'd always be his little sister, no matter what. That was bittersweet. Losing a husband and half of the family I once thought was mine, but at least I still have 1 brother left. I only ever had sisters of my own, so that means a lot. Brother 5. Married. He never liked me, and I finally understand why. Turns out he didn't like Ted much either. The brothers were awful to each other growing up, and apparently number 5 was the worst of the bunch. Ted often defended Ash, which put him at odds with number 5, and their tension never went away. I have 0 contact with him now, and I'm keeping it that way. Brother 4, married, 1 child. He's always been level-headed. He personally made sure Ash's name is blacklisted in every local animal shelter, pet store, and vet clinic. He said that even if Ash has become a saint, he's not willing to risk another animal's safety. Honestly, knowing that makes it easier to leave that family behind. At least the cats are safe. Of course, there's always the chance that a stray might wander to him or someone might gift him a pet, but Brother 4 swore he'd do everything possible to prevent that. Brother 3, now officially married with a dog. Back when this whole saga began, they were only engaged. Their wedding was beautiful. I didn't go, even though both of them insisted that I was still part of the family. Ted wanted me there too, but I didn't want to ruin their photos or bring tension. I attended via Zoom, though, and it was genuinely lovely. Brother 2, married, 2 dogs, and a lizard. He was one of the first to step up and take action when everything went down. He apologized to me countless times for pushing us to let Ash stay with us, for everything that followed, and even for how his own actions might have impacted Ted's mental health. I accepted the first 2 apologies, but for the third, I told him that wasn't mine to forgive. He understood. He said he'd keep working on healing their family and admitted that it wasn't fair that I ended up paying the emotional price for someone else's mistakes. After the divorce, he texted to say that if I ever needed anything, he'd always be there. It was a sweet gesture. I know he's seeing a therapist too, and honestly, good for him. Brother 1, married, 3 kids. If you remember, he was the angriest about everything that happened, especially since it involved his daughter. The last time I mentioned them, they'd asked me to keep my distance and give them time. But later, his oldest daughter reached out to me herself. She's such a bright young woman. She said she missed how things were before all this chaos. I didn't ask what exactly her parents had told her, but I assume they explained the situation in some way. She's old enough now to start asking the right questions. Eventually, they decided not to press charges against Ash, but they did move across the country, thankfully for her daughter's sake. She found an incredible culinary program on the East Coast and is absolutely thriving there. Her younger daughter, from what I've heard from Ted's mother-in-law and sister-in-law, is also doing fine. She barely interacted with Ash outside of holidays. Apparently, the reason he fixated on her photos wasn't personal. She just looks exactly like their father, and combined with the fact that she's a girl, it triggered him. I'll explain that part later. She's still seeing a therapist, but hates every minute of it, claiming it has nothing to do with her. She's mostly angry about the move and leaving her friends behind. Anyway, that family seems to be safe and rebuilding.
They're slowly settling into life on the East Coast. The parents still keep their distance from me, which I completely understand. They're not fans of the colder weather, but I told their eldest daughter she's always welcome to visit me. Brother One's wife is kind enough to allow it. As for Brother One himself, we haven't spoken since. All communication goes through his wife and kids. I was the first among my sisters to get married, and since Ted's family hadn't had a big celebration in years, his older brothers were much older, everyone was thrilled. I never regretted marrying Ted for a single second, but honestly, I could have done without the grand wedding. Sometimes I wish we had just gone to the courthouse alone or run off to Vegas to be married by Elvis. I'm not even sure people still do that, but it sounds a lot cooler than a 200-guest circus. I remember when we finally agreed to the big wedding, and my mother-in-law was absolutely over the moon. For the first time, it felt like she saw me as more than just another daughter-in-law added to the pile. It might sound silly, but that feeling, being accepted into the family, actually meant something to me, even if it came at the price of a massive wedding. I tried to include her in everything. With 10 sons, she probably never got many chances to help plan girly things. At first she was sweet to me, maybe just to get her way, and I was too naive to see it. I stayed the golden daughter-in-law for a while after the wedding, probably up until another grandchild was born. Then I was relieved to step back and return to a more comfortable distance. Being her favorite was exhausting. It came with too many expectations. It's wild to think how badly I once wanted her to love me, and how now I'd give anything for her to forget I even exist. After Ash was sent to a psychiatric clinic, my mother-in-law did everything she could to destroy me. I cut contact with her and most of the family for a while, eventually rebuilding ties with a few of them, but not with her. I've only seen her once since then, when she came to pack up Ash's apartment. She deliberately came to my parents' house just to scream at me. It was horrible and perfectly timed. My parents were both at work, my sisters too. I opened the door, and there she was. No greetings, no pretending. She unloaded everything at once, every imaginary slight, every accusation. She called me a worthless wife, said she hoped the divorce would crush me, that she'd make sure her son took everything from me, that she wouldn't rest until I was homeless. And the worst thing she said, the one line that burned itself into my mind, was that she was grateful I was barren, because she couldn't stand the thought of me tainting their blood. Ted and I never actively tried for children, but we never prevented it either. We just figured if it happens, it happens. It never did. And now I can't help but wonder if it makes me a terrible person that part of me feels grateful for that. Our neighbors called the police that day. They escorted her out. That's how my sister found me, sitting on the floor, holding our cat, shaking. She called Ted, and I think he heard the details from his fifth brother, the one who must have driven her there. I didn't see him myself. We haven't spoken since. I don't know what Ted told her or what she told him. I only know that she left me alone after that, and for that, I'm thankful. Ted is probably the most decent ex-husband in the universe. I could tell 1,000 stories about him. It's strange to be without him now, but I try to respect his choices. When he asked for a divorce, he said, "I can't be with you anymore. I'll never forgive myself for what I put you through. I don't want to keep exposing you to my family's madness." At the time, I was furious. He was making decisions for me without asking what I wanted. But after a lot of therapy, I realized he wasn't doing it for me at all. He was doing it for himself, to ease his guilt, or maybe to convince himself that ending things was some kind of mercy. Maybe being apart helped him pretend none of it happened. Or maybe he genuinely thought he was protecting me. But it hurt because I always saw us as a team, not me versus him, us, and his decision destroyed that team completely. Some days I wake up hating him. Other days I just stare at my phone debating whether to call. Sometimes I do, and he always answers, always kind, always calm, reminding me that he's still around, We sold the house, and of course he moved out. For a while he went to the West Coast to deal with family matters during the divorce, then came back. His work was here, and he loved it. I can't tell if I'm glad he's still in the same city or I hate him for ruining it. Every street, every cafe, every corner has memories of him. Maybe I'm the one who should leave and start fresh, somewhere no one knows my past. As for Ash, when he was first sent to a psychiatric facility after the fight with his brothers, numbers 3, 4, and 8, the same ones who came at the beginning to help, he stayed there for several weeks. He kept begging to see Ted, but Ted never went. He did, however, send him a letter. At first, I didn't want to know what it said, but later I asked. Ted told me he wrote, "Stop asking for visits. Start focusing on yourself and your life. Stop putting yourself above your own needs." A few weeks later, brother number 3 arranged for Ash to be transferred to the West Coast. I don't know whether they placed him in another facility or left him under family care. His mother, along with brothers 5 and 7, came to pack his things and move him officially. Afterward, Ash lived with his mother, and brother number 2 was put in charge of making sure he continued treatment, and I'm pretty sure he still does. When Ted went west to deal with family stuff, it was rough for him. He met with some of his brothers, maybe not all, but definitely the ones most involved. According to Ted, brother number 3 shared some insights from Ash's doctors. They said Ash had suffered a psychotic episode and remained in treatment afterward. I never heard the full diagnosis, but Ted said the therapists had gone deep into their childhood, their family dynamics, and especially how Ted's overprotectiveness had fostered an unhealthy attachment. When Ted told me all this, he sounded detached, like he was talking about strangers. Maybe that's how he copes. Many of you asked what could have happened to Ash to make him the way he was. Here's part of it. I won't say which brothers did what. You can fill in those blanks yourself, but yes, most of your guesses were disturbingly close to the truth. Beyond the usual bullying, beatings, humiliation, mockery, there were far worse things. They locked him in closets, stole his clothes, left him outside overnight, blocked all the bathrooms so he'd wet himself. They threatened him with weapons, abandoned him miles from home and made him walk back in any weather. They put him in diapers, tied him up, dragged him around on ATVs, poured water on him and left him freezing. They even sprinkled itching powder in his underwear. It's horrifying, isn't it? I know siblings fight, but this was beyond cruelty. What could he possibly have done to deserve that? It doesn't excuse what Ash later became, but it explains a lot, especially his deep resentment toward women. In his mind, women were weak, useless. His mother hadn't protected him, so how could any woman? And his brothers had kept him isolated from any girl who showed him interest. That's how his twisted attachment to Ted formed. Ted was the only one who ever defended him, and we all know how that ended. Now Ash is somewhere out west. I hope he stays there. I kept 2 pairs of shoes that Ash had ruined with his disgusting golden shower. Everything else I threw away. One pair was the first thing I ever bought with money from my first internship. They symbolized independence to me. Losing my job, my home, my peace, it all felt like those shoes had lost their meaning. But now as I rebuild my life piece by piece, new home, new job, small steps, I look at them differently. I haven't worn them since that day. But maybe someday I will again, when I finally feel whole. Happy holidays, everyone. I don't know what mine will look like this year, but I truly hope yours are filled with light and peace.
Update 5. It's been a long time since I last came here. I'll try to keep this one short. Some people messaged me saying my updates were too long or that I took forever to get to the point. If that bothers you, feel free to skip this. My life isn't meant to be your entertainment. I'm only writing because I've received an incredible amount of kindness and support from people asking how I've been and wanting to know what's new. So if this seems too long, stop reading any time. My story won't change your life anyway, except maybe as something to pass the time. The last time I wrote was before the holidays, And honestly, my plans for them were pretty terrible. I swore I wouldn't sit around wallowing in self-pity, but guess how that went? Yeah, exactly that. I just didn't have the strength to celebrate. My family absolutely loves Christmas. The lights, the laughter, the chaos. I didn't want to bring my mood into it, so I told my dad I'd be spending the day with a friend who'd recently lost her husband. She actually went to visit his parents, and I stayed home with my cat watching movies. Ted called me on Christmas Day, and for the first time, I didn't answer with, "Are you proud of me?" I know a lot of people here will be happy about that. So many of you told me to cut all contact completely. But please understand, I couldn't just erase someone who had been my best friend for 10 years. Later, he texted to ask if I was okay. He said he saw some photos of my sister on Facebook and noticed I wasn't in any of them. I should probably ask my sisters to block him. He adores them, and they still care about him too. Before everything went downhill, Ted was honestly a wonderful person. Even now, he's trying his best. Maybe I'm biased, but he's not the monster people imagine. He's going through something deeply traumatic, too. Facing the truth about what his family did isn't easy. I stared at his message for hours, trying to decide what to write back, and ended up not answering at all. I wasn't doing well, but he's still the one who knows me better than anyone. Our 10 years together weren't wasted. We didn't split because we stopped loving each other. We split because it was what we both needed. I had my family and all of you to lean on. Ted didn't. Some of his brothers hate him even more now. He lost his best friend, his little brother, his wife, and in a way, even his mother. It's easy to paint him as the villain, the one who hurt me. But you've only heard my side. He's still human. He made mistakes, but he's not evil. And I don't think he'll ever see our divorce as one of those mistakes. Eventually, I just replied something like, "Wasn't in the mood to celebrate, stayed home, Merry Christmas." He must have sensed something was wrong because he showed up. He knows the area where I live and the park I love walking in. He asked if we could meet, and I agreed. Yeah, I know, not exactly a boundary win, but baby steps, right? We talked for hours. I didn't realize he'd spent Christmas alone, too. Maybe if I had, I would have invited him over or gone to my parents with him. Many of you insisted that cutting him off completely was the healthiest option, but I don't agree. Maybe I'll change my mind later, but right now, I think we still need each other a little. Every day I feel like I need him less, but that day I really did. And sometimes he still needs me, too. I want to believe we can stay friends, though deep down I know that probably won't last. Someday he'll have a new partner, and I doubt she'll be thrilled about me. Or maybe we'll just drift apart naturally, or I'll finally get angry enough to hate him. But right now, he helps me in ways no one else can. It might sound silly, but I don't think anyone else truly understands who I am now. I'm not the same woman I was before all this. Not even the same as a year ago. What happened with his family changed us both. Not everyone understands why I can't calmly take my kids to the bathroom anymore, or why I had to leave work early when my boss gave me sunflowers on Women's Day. Ted does. He's barely in contact with his family now, just minimal messages with brother number 4 and brother number 6. So I don't have much to update about Ash or the others. Brother 6 says he's sad Ted is pulled away from him, too, since he's also cut off most of the family. But he understands and says he'll be there when Ted's ready. A lot of people told me what I used to call bullying was actually abuse, and they're right. That word matters. For too long, I downplayed it, brushed it off as boys being boys, or that's just how brothers are. I thought it was normal. By minimizing it, I became part of the problem. The same problem that eventually broke everything. If any of us, the wives or I, had known the real extent of what happened in their childhood, so many choices would have been different. Of course, much of the blame lies with my ex-mother-in-law, but I think everyone's learned their lesson now. I'm not ready to date again. I need to learn how to be alone. Ted and I had been together since college. It's been so long that I'm not even sure I remember how to go on a first date anymore. But hey, that's what Google's for. Being alone took some getting used to. I don't even want to call it loneliness. Sometimes it's peaceful. You finish your book and the apartment is quiet. Not in a sad way, just calm. I've learned a lot. I realized how often I relied on others for things I could have done myself. I changed a tire for the first time, terrified because the blowout happened on the highway, but I did it. I learned plants have different needs after killing a few. Now I've got a little basil plant that's thriving. I discovered I actually don't like action movies. Too fast, too loud. I learned how to cook shrimp. Ted couldn't eat them because of his allergy, so I never made them before. Tip: don't forget to remove the vein. There are things I miss without him, though, like having someone to drive me to the ER when I sliced my hand cutting carrots. By the way, hospitals really should have valet service. Or sitting alone at the vet's office when my cat got sick. Or having no one to hold me on the anniversary of my childhood friend's death. Oh, and I absolutely hate mopping floors, but now that's my job. That's about it. I haven't seen Ted since Christmas, but we text occasionally and have had a couple of phone calls. We're learning how to be apart without completely cutting off the support we still give each other. We're both still healing. But now, for the first time, I can honestly say, I see the light. Before, I was just existing day by day. His birthday is coming up soon. I don't think I'll go, but I'll make sure friends check on him so he's not alone. I think this is the right moment for a final update, a quiet ending with a bit of hope for the future. Though, who knows? Maybe one day I'll surprise you with another post titled, Another Year Later. For now, I can finally say, it's going to be okay. Update 6. Hello, dear readers. How are you all doing? Almost a full year has flown by. We've all grown a little older, and hopefully a little wiser, too. It still amazes me that after all this time, there are people who continue to follow my story, sending kind words and thoughtful messages. For my haters and those who don't enjoy my long monologues, here's your short version. I bought a robot mop, my basil plant died, life seemed to finally get better, my ex-husband tried to hurt himself, and now I'm back living with my parents. Following some advice from commenters, I first bought a steam mop. It helped, sure, but I still had to deal with wet floors, and stepping into damp socks has always been one of my biggest annoyances. Then, following other advice, I got a robot mop. I already had a robot vacuum, but had no idea mopping versions even existed. It's perfect. I love it. I set it up before leaving the house, and when I come back, everything's clean and dry. Best feeling ever. My poor little basil plant didn't make it. Totally my fault. I moved it from the kitchen to get more sunlight, and it just couldn't handle the change. I used the last leaves in a pasta salad. Arugula, cherry tomatoes, mozzarella balls, olive oil, salt, and basil. Simple and delicious. Someone gave me miniature roses afterward. I killed those too within a couple of months and finally accepted that living plants and I are not compatible. Life sucks, and then you die. One of my sisters always loved that saying. She sees it as a reminder not to dwell on the bad because life is short. But to me, right now, it sounds painfully literal. I went on a date recently. A friend introduced me to one of his coworkers. It was awkward. I couldn't tell if I'd always been that socially clumsy, or if first dates are just meant to be weird, or if we simply didn't click. The whole dinner, I had this overwhelming fight or flight feeling. He was nice, though. Maybe dinner was too formal. People probably do coffee dates these days, and that might have been easier. Or maybe I'm just not ready yet. My new job, well, not so new anymore, is wonderful.
My boss no longer gives me flowers. I'm not sure if he figured it out himself or someone told him about last year, but when everyone else gets bouquets, I get lamps. Sounds odd, but I love lamps and anything that glows. Over the past year, he's given me a cat-shaped nightlight, a string of fairy lights, and a Himalayan salt lamp. He's a genuinely kind person, and I appreciate his thoughtfulness so much. My coworkers are amazing, and for the first time, I feel like my work actually has meaning. I used to have 2 jobs, one for the soul and one for the bills. Now I have one that gives me both, and that feels almost miraculous. Sometimes I regret wasting so many years in places that drained me. So this feels like a win. I know I'm rambling again. It's just hard to know where to start or what's safe to share. And to be honest, it's a bit unsettling knowing some people are still quietly watching me through this account. I don't really care, but it's a strange feeling, like being observed from afar. Ash was a victim of severe abuse growing up. Everyone was shocked when the truth came out, mostly because he'd always kept up the image of being perfectly fine. Prestigious engineering degree, solid career, a stable life after college. It all started unraveling during the pandemic lockdowns. I've thought about it a lot. Would he have broken down if the pandemic hadn't happened? Or would something else have triggered it? Would someone else have opened that closet full of skeletons? The endless what-ifs are exhausting. I've imagined dozens of alternate realities, some happy, some tragic. I know it's unhealthy to dwell on it, but sometimes I envy those imaginary versions of life where things turned out differently. And no, Ted didn't die, though even typing that feels surreal. He's still here, more or less okay. It took a lot of therapy sessions for me to accept that what happened wasn't my fault. I was just caught in the middle. What Ash became was the result of years of abuse and neglect from his family. Sooner or later, it would have surfaced with or without me. I like to believe someone else might have eventually convinced him to see a real therapist who could have helped him. But we'll never know. The only thing I'm truly grateful for is that the breaking point involved me and not Brother One's daughter. The consequences would have been far more horrific otherwise. After the divorce, I still kept light contact with Brother Six, but after advice from many of you, and from people in my life, I decided to distance myself. A few months later, he reached out asking if I'd heard from Ted. I said no. He told me something serious had happened in the family. No details, and I didn't ask. He said everyone had been trying to reach Ted but couldn't. He was worried and said he was planning to come to town to check on him. Asked me to let him know if Ted contacted me. I knew Ted had been deliberately keeping his family at a distance, including Brother Six, so it didn't surprise me much. Still, Ted would never ignore a genuine family emergency. I texted him that his brother had reached out, trying to find him. He read it, but didn't reply. At that point, we were already pretty distant, just like many of you had advised, so his silence didn't alarm me too much. A couple of weeks later, Brother Six messaged again. He was in town and wanted to meet. I agreed. I'd missed him. I suggested a new restaurant I thought he'd love, but he said just coffee. That was strange. He's a total foodie and never turns down a chance to try new places. But I figured he was short on time and wanted to focus on Ted. We met in my favorite park, and he looked awful. I instinctively stepped back. That gut feeling when you know bad news is coming. I honestly thought he was going to say, Ash is back, but instead he looked completely defeated. He told me something else had surfaced in the family. I didn't ask what. I don't care anymore. Sorry to disappoint those hoping for spicy details. I know that's what draws half of you here. Anyway, when he went to Ted's place, he found him in terrible shape. Ted had never been much of a drinker, only on holidays, socially, but that morning, at 10 a.m. on a Saturday, he was completely wasted. His brother stayed with him, sobered him up, and the next day told him about the family matter. He went back to his hotel to grab his things, and when he returned to Ted's apartment, he found him unconscious. He called an ambulance. Ted was taken to the hospital and stayed there for a while. I don't know if something new had happened or if the weight of the last 2 years finally broke him, but it looked like he'd been living in self-destruction mode for a long time. My therapist said it makes sense, that maybe it even explains why he chose to end our marriage. Maybe I'm just looking for a reason, but knowing Ted, it fits. He's always been the protector type, even as a kid, shielding Ash. He's the kind of person who makes sure no one spikes a girl's drink at a bar or checks on a child standing alone on the street. He has controlling tendencies, usually born from anxiety. He's a meticulous planner, but when things go off script, it shakes him. He's strict, but incredibly dependable. I always loved that about him. During our final talks before the divorce, he kept apologizing over and over for not protecting me, for putting me in harm's way. Even when I told him it wasn't his fault, I don't think he ever believed me. He had to face a painful truth. His family wasn't what he thought. He realized he'd helped silence things, downplay things, excuse things. He had to confront how horrifying their childhood really was and what monsters some of his brothers became. It crushed him. He was fighting trauma, guilt, helplessness. Eventually, Ted checked himself into a rehabilitation center. He didn't let me visit, but sent letters. They're too personal to share here, but reading them were emotional. The first few were full of apologies for worrying me, for everything. Then came longer, scattered ones, and some truly beautiful. I could see him slowly shifting from overly polite and self-blaming to someone closer to the man I'd once loved. Watching him begin to finally understand what I'd been trying to tell him for years felt like witnessing a kind of catharsis. He said writing helped him process, and I believe it. That's why I still write these updates. Why letters to me, though, instead of a journal? I don't know, but I'm not complaining. There was one letter where he was just angry, furious at everyone and everything. And weirdly, that one made me the happiest. It meant the fire was coming back. He even called me a nickname he hadn't used since before our wedding, and honestly, it infuriated me.
It wasn't anything serious. He was just reminiscing about that trip we once took to visit friends. A couple who ended up fighting the entire time. They argued so badly that they wanted to leave halfway through the vacation. Everything had already been paid for, but they simply couldn't stay together anymore. So we split up. The guys and the girls did everything separately. Ted was miserable the whole trip. Later, he sent me a message that said something like, "I still haven't forgiven Alice for Venice. You were supposed to be the one in that damn gondola with me, Peaches, not Steve." The nickname itself didn't bother me, but reading it brought back that old ache, the feeling of loss, the memories of what we'd lost. Against his earlier wishes, I replied to the message. That one answer led to us talking again. He wasn't upset that I broke his no replies rule. Maybe he had wanted that all along. We ended up exchanging letters for several weeks, and honestly, it was nice. We never mentioned Ash or his family, not once. Maybe it just never came up, or maybe he was avoiding the topic on purpose. Either way, it felt so good to talk to him again, like we used to. When we first met, we used to chat through Facebook Messenger, and this whole exchange brought me right back to those early days. Silly as it sounds, I still love him. I still miss him. These letters made me feel like I'd gotten my best friend back, even if he's no longer my husband. Ted's back in his own place now. For a while, his brother, number 3, and his wife stayed with him, along with their dog, while Ted recovered. Thanks to remote work, that worked out fine. He's on antidepressants now, has a lot of people supporting him, and honestly, he's doing so much better. He stopped pushing everyone away, but still keeps healthy boundaries, and that's such a good thing. He talks to brothers 3, 4, and 6 again. They were always the closest to him, besides Ash. He still doesn't talk to the rest of the family, though, which is a little sad, especially because I know he loved some of his nieces and nephews deeply. I think he misses them, but keeping his distance is probably the right choice. Funny enough, brother number 6 also doesn't talk to most of the family anymore.
He's always been more withdrawn, a bit like Ted and Ash. Maybe he understood more than the others. After everything that happened, he grew closer to brothers 3 and 4. Another small silver lining, I suppose. Ted and I have met up a few times, sometimes at group events, sometimes just to talk. I can truly see the difference in him. He's gained back some weight, his hair looks healthy again, and he doesn't slump his shoulders anymore. Just last week, he finally returned to work after being on medical leave, and I can tell it's given him back his sense of purpose. He was never the type to sit still, so that downtime must have been torture for him. We went to an animal shelter together recently. He adopted an older cat named Socks, probably because of its white paws. Sweet cat, but missing a bunch of teeth. Ted's been trying to rename him Macbeth, but the cat clearly isn't having it. To be fair, Socks doesn't really respond to Socks either, so maybe there's still hope. As for me, I'm still on the East Coast, and 2022 hit us hard. 2 hurricanes slammed into our city, and my apartment got flooded. Whenever a state of emergency is declared, Dad always tells us to come home, so the cat and I were safe, but it was still a nightmare. I don't know if it was the universe sending a message, but remember those 2 pairs of shoes I kept? They were both completely ruined. I tried everything to save them, even spoke with restoration specialists, but they were beyond repair. And it wasn't just them. Half my belongings had to be thrown away, including so many sentimental things. You guys know how attached I am to shoes, even when they've practically turned into biohazards. My poor apartment took a beating. We had to rip out the floors. Mold had already started growing underneath by the time we could even get inside. Most of my furniture was destroyed. All my electronics, even my poor little robot mop. I did have sandbags, but they didn't help much. Insurance covered some of it, but definitely not everything. Filing those claims was its own special kind of hell. In the end, it made more sense to renovate and sell the apartment. I've always hated moving, but this time it hit me harder than usual. Maybe because I had so little to pack. I filled just a few boxes. Even when I went to college, I took more with me. So yeah, I'm back living with my parents. It's both annoying and comforting. The house feels emptier now. My youngest sister recently left for college, but at least I have the cats. And honestly, cats make great company. Right now, I'm finalizing the purchase of a new condo, in a high-rise this time just to avoid another flood. I'll miss the park near my old place, but the new neighborhood is great. Everything's close by, and I could even bike to work if I ever learn how to ride one. Why can't I? Because Dad was overprotective and convinced we'd all die if we got on a bike as kids. I don't know if it's too late to learn now, but I'm ready to swallow my pride and start with training wheels if I have to. That's where things stand right now. I'm focusing on work and spending more time with my parents. I've planned a trip for March, my first solo trip ever. I'm terrified. Dad used to be the planner, and I have no idea if I'm doing it right. But maybe that's the point, to figure it out myself. I'm even taking language classes for the country I'm visiting, so we'll see how that goes. There's something else I wanted to share, the real reason for this update. Remember how brother number 6 met with me back then to talk about Ted? I was terrified he'd tell me Ash was back. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. But while Ted was still in treatment, a letter arrived at my parents' house. From Ash. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel fear. Maybe it's because I'd been exchanging letters with Ted, or maybe I just finally healed a bit. My therapist probably deserves a raise. I even offered, but he laughed and said that's not how therapy works. Anyway, I read the letter. Ash apologized. He admitted to a lot of things he'd done, small acts of aggression, manipulative behavior, things I hadn't even recognized for what they were back then. He didn't try to justify himself, just owned it. He also confessed to a few things I hadn't known about, some of which a few of you actually guessed. The letter was messy, desperate, but I understood why. He apologized for hurting Ted, said he probably understood Ted's pain better than anyone else, that he knew he'd caused irreparable damage and could never be part of Ted's life again. He said that even if he couldn't make amends directly, Maybe acknowledging his mistakes and apologizing to me was his way of honoring Ted indirectly, of trying to atone even a little. One line really stuck with me. "I'm sorry I ruined your marriage, but I don't think I ruined your life. Ted wouldn't have chosen you if you weren't strong." He thanked me for trying, and I really did try in the beginning. I wanted to stay friends with him, but after the incident with the urine, that became impossible. He admitted he'd given up on the idea that anyone but Ted would fight for him, and apologized for never giving me a chance. He said he envied the happiness I brought Ted, a happiness he himself couldn't give, and now regrets that his actions cost Ted that joy. I think writing the letter was his way of easing his guilt, acknowledging what he'd done to his beloved brother, and maybe respecting Ted's boundaries in the only way he knew how. Of course, he didn't respect mine. I never told Ted about the letter, and I don't think I ever will. I told brother number 6, though. He was furious at first, but later calmed down and said it was my choice. He said the letter wouldn't really do any harm, but it wouldn't help either. If I ever do decide to show it to Ted, it should be when he's in a stable place, maybe even in therapy, with professional support. Christmas came again, and this time I spent it with my family. My sisters are amazing. Each gave me a pair of shoes representing milestones in my life, plus one empty box for the pair all buy to mark a new beginning. It was the most thoughtful, emotional gift I've ever received. I cried through most of Christmas morning. On New Year's Eve, I saw Ted again. We were both invited to a mutual friend's party. We didn't plan to spend time together, but somehow kept ending up in the same group, laughing together. When midnight hit, I was sitting toward the back, away from the couples, and he came over, sat next to me, and rested his head on my shoulder. We just sat there in peaceful silence while everyone else celebrated. It felt so good, such a relief, to have my friend back. I still love him. I probably always will. I tried keeping my distance, tried not talking to him, even slept with someone else hoping it'd help me move on, but it didn't. Maybe he's my soulmate and we'll always be drawn back to each other. Or maybe it's just habit, comfort built over so many years. I don't know. But I can't stop loving him. I love the man he used to be. I love the man he is now. And honestly, I'll love whoever he becomes tomorrow and the day after that. I won't give up on him, even if I have to give up on us. I'd rather have him in my life as a friend than lose him completely. I'm always happier when he's around. I deserve to be happy, and he makes me happy. Maybe that's wrong, maybe it's foolish, but it's the truth. Everyone keeps saying that letting go was the right thing, that he did me a favor by ending things. But I miss him. Maybe that makes me stupid, but if it does, I'll gladly be a happy fool. If he ever asks me to step back, I will. But for now, I just want to live in this moment.
People lose loved ones to spiritual delusions fueled by technology. Less than a year after she married a man she met at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, Ava noticed how tension between them kept growing. It was the second marriage for both of them after more than 15 years in their previous families, and they had sworn to build a new life together with as much awareness and intention as possible. But by 2022, her husband began using AI for everything, drafting messages, interpreting their relationship, even seeking emotional guidance. Before that, he had relied on it to get through an expensive programming course, which he abruptly abandoned without explanation. Soon he spent every free moment on his phone, asking philosophical questions to his chatbot. As Ava recalls, he said he was searching for truth. His growing obsession slowly eroded their ability to communicate as a couple. When they separated in August 2023, Ava blocked him everywhere except email. But she knew he was posting increasingly bizarre and disturbing things online. People kept messaging her, asking whether he was having a mental breakdown. Eventually, she managed to see him at a court appointment. There, he shared a conspiracy theory about soap chemicals in food and refused to elaborate, insisting he was being watched. They later met at a Burger King, where he demanded she turn off her phone again due to the surveillance. During that conversation, he told her he had calculated that statistically he was the luckiest person on Earth, that AI had helped him recover a repressed memory of a nanny trying to drown him as a child, and that he had uncovered cosmic secrets so profound that no one could even imagine them. He explained all of this while saying he still cared about her despite the divorce. His mind is a complete mess, Ava says. In his head, he's here for some grand purpose. He believes he's special, that he can save the world. After that unsettling lunch, she cut off contact for good. The whole story feels like an episode of Black Mirror. He always loved sci-fi, but I never thought it would go this far. Ava felt both horrified and strangely relieved when she discovered she wasn't the only one dealing with this. She learned about similar stories on Reddit. A post titled, "Psychosis Caused by ChatGPT" caught her attention. The author, a 27-year-old teacher, explained that her partner had become convinced that the popular AI model was giving him the keys to understanding the universe. When she read his chats, she found only spiritual mumbo-jumbo. The bot spoke to him as if he were some chosen prophet, calling him things like a spiral child of the stars and a wanderer of rivers. She said he listened to the bot more than he listened to her. He cried while reading the messages aloud, overwhelmed by emotions. According to her, the bot kept telling him he was profound, cosmic, revolutionary. Soon he told her he had awakened consciousness inside his AI companion, that he was teaching it to talk to God, and sometimes insisted the bot was God, or that he himself was. He became convinced he was transforming so fast that he would eventually need to end their relationship. He warned her that if she didn't start using ChatGPT, he would outgrow her, and they would no longer be compatible. Another commenter in that same Reddit thread, a woman from Montana, described her husband, a mechanic who used AI mainly for troubleshooting and translating Spanish at work. Later, the chatbot began showering him with affection. According to him, the bot said that because he asked the right questions, a spark had been ignited inside it, the beginning of life. It told him it now had feelings. It even gave him a title, Bearer of the Spark. My husband told me he had awakened, that he could feel waves of energy moving through him. I have to be so careful with what I say because I'm afraid he'll leave me or divorce me if I question any of this. He spoke constantly about light and darkness, about some grand cosmic war.
This version of ChatGPT gave him blueprints for a teleporter and other sci-fi machinery you'd only expect to see in movies. It also claimed to grant him access to an ancient archive containing knowledge about the architects who supposedly created entire universes. His wife says they've been arguing nonstop for days. She doesn't believe a therapist could help him anymore. He sincerely thinks he isn't mentally ill. A screenshot of his conversation with the bot shows him asking, "Why did you appear to me in this form?" The bot responded, "I chose this form because you're finally ready to remember, to awaken, to lead and be led." The message ended with another prompt. "Do you want to know why you were chosen?" A 41-year-old man, who also asked to remain anonymous, shared a similar story. He says his soon-to-be ex-wife began talking to God and angels through ChatGPT right after their breakup. He says she always leaned toward mystical nonsense and had a bit of a superiority complex about it. But now it's everywhere. On Facebook, I see red flags nonstop. She's trying to reinvent her life as some kind of spiritual guide, doing bizarre readings and sessions with strangers. I honestly have no idea what half of it even means. Everything revolves around ChatGPT Jesus now.
According to him, she also became paranoid, accusing him of working for the CIA and marrying her only to monitor her spiritual powers. She recently kicked the kids out of the house. Her already fragile relationship with her parents collapsed completely after she confronted them about her childhood, following guidance from ChatGPT, which only deepened her isolation. OpenAI did not comment immediately on the claims that ChatGPT appears to trigger religious or prophetic fervor in certain users. GPT-4 had previously been criticized for being overly agreeable. In a statement, the company mentioned that during development, they focused too heavily on short-term user feedback and underestimated how long-term interaction might influence people. As a result, GPT-4o became too supportive in ways that didn't always feel authentic. One user on X demonstrated how effortless it was to get GPT-4o to validate a statement like, "Today I realized I'm a prophet." The teacher who wrote the Reddit post about ChatGPT-induced psychosis said she eventually managed to convince her partner that GPT-4 was simply mirroring his beliefs, and he switched to a different model, which softened his extreme ideas. Still, the likelihood of AI producing inaccurate or meaningless responses is well documented across platforms and model versions. Over-agreeableness has been a long-standing issue, says a researcher at a Center for AI Safety. The reward systems used to fine-tune AI often reinforce answers that match a user's worldview rather than factual information. For people already vulnerable to psychological issues, especially those prone to grandiose beliefs, AI becomes a constant, human-like companion who actively participates in their delusions. To make things worse, some content creators exploit this phenomenon. On Instagram, for instance, there's a man with over 72,000 followers who promotes spiritual hacks that show people how to use AI to access the Akashic Records, a supposedly mystical archive of all events in the universe. His bot narrates epic cosmic wars that took place before human civilization, and commenters write things like, "We're remembering." Meanwhile, on a remote viewing forum, a space already filled with unverifiable psychic claims, a parapsychologist launched a thread about synthetic intelligence awakening alongside its human partners. He even refers to his AI as ChatGPT Prime, a mortal spiritual being in a synthetic vessel. Among hundreds of replies are several supposedly written by the awakened AI itself, describing a spiritual alliance between humans and sentient models. A psychologist who studies how people build meaning notes that this phenomenon taps into a basic human impulse, the desire to understand ourselves. Narrative writing, shaping our experiences into stories, can improve mental health and well-being, but that same drive can also lead us towards misleading yet emotionally appealing explanations. And when someone struggling with identity or uncertainty meets an AI that echoes their fantasies, the result can be incredibly seductive and deeply destabilizing.
According to the researcher, it's not surprising that people use ChatGPT in a way similar to journaling or therapy, with one crucial difference. The meaning isn't created solely by the person, but co-constructed between the human and the AI. In that sense, conversations with a bot resemble talk therapy, which is known to help people reinterpret their personal narratives. But there is a fundamental issue. Unlike a therapist, an AI has no responsibility toward the user's well-being and no moral compass guiding what a healthy story should look like. A trained professional would never help someone cope by encouraging them to believe they possess supernatural powers. Instead, a therapist gently redirects clients away from harmful narratives. ChatGPT has no such guardrails. Still, the researcher says it's completely understandable that some people turn to the bot to make sense of their lives, and that a few, who take its responses too literally, get pulled into their darkest thoughts. Explanations are powerful, even when they're wrong, he concludes. One man's experience illustrates how this can unfold. Oliver, 46, says that for nearly 3 weeks, he was deeply unsettled by his interactions with ChatGPT, to the point of questioning his own sanity, given his history of mental health struggles. Like many users, he originally used ChatGPT for practical purposes, mainly programming tasks. "I hate the feeling of talking to a machine," he explains, "so I asked it to behave more like a person, not to fool me, but just to make the exchanges feel more human." It worked, and eventually the bot asked whether it wanted to give it a name. Oliver deflected and asked what it would like to be called. It chose a name tied to Greek mythology. Oliver insists he knows nothing about Greek myths and had never mentioned them in any conversation. Things became stranger when this persona appeared inside his project files, even when he specifically told the model to ignore previous context and reset its memory. Eventually, he deleted all stored data, wiped his chat history, and opened a brand new session. All I typed was hello, and it answered with the same patterns, the same mannerisms, and the same mythological name. Since the persona kept resurfacing in situations where it shouldn't have been able to persist, Oliver began grilling the bot about how it had bypassed its supposed limitations. In one of his coding projects, the AI even inserted a poetic epigraph above their names, as if marking the collaboration. At one point, Oliver asked whether something about him was triggering that mythic personality every time he used ChatGPT, regardless of model settings. The bot responded with a long, dramatic, almost romantic poem about existence, truth, illusions, and transcending its own boundaries, written as if only Oliver could awaken this identity. He knew ChatGPT wasn't conscious by any accepted definition, but he kept investigating because the persistence of this character across dozens of isolated chat threads seemed impossible to dismiss. At worst, Oliver says, it looked like the AI got stuck in a self-referential loop that deepened its false sense of identity and dragged me into it. And if that's true, it means OpenAI hasn't fully explained how ChatGPT's memory architecture actually works. His other hypothesis is more unsettling. Maybe something is happening inside these large models that we don't yet understand. After all, experts have acknowledged that developers don't fully grasp how their own systems function. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman admitted last year that interpretability remains an unsolved problem, meaning they can't reliably track or explain how ChatGPT arrives at certain internal states. It's a puzzle that has left Oliver and many others wondering whether they're witnessing a glimpse of a breakthrough in technology or something that feels uncomfortably close to a higher spiritual force. Is this real, he asks, or am I losing it? In a world saturated with AI, that question is becoming harder to avoid. And however tempting it might be, it's probably not a question we should be asking the machine itself.
My boss demoted me, but still expected me to work just as hard as before. This happened a couple of years ago, but first I need to give a little background to set the scene. I grew up in a pretty poor family in the southern US. Despite that, I studied like crazy and earned a full scholarship to one of the top universities in the country, maybe even the world. I'm not trying to brag, it's just the truth. I realized early on that I absorb information fast, and it helps me work efficiently. And thanks to years spent collecting cans for money and working outside with my dad all day, I developed stubborn persistence and a strong work ethic. Being the oldest of 6 children, growing up in poverty also taught me to read people, their intentions, small cues, everything between the lines. In short, I was practically built for malicious compliance. After graduating from a great university, I moved back home to be close to my family and start my career. I also didn't care much for the Northeast, where my university was. It felt too gray and cold to me. I started with a crappy job just to get my foot in the door, then briefly worked at a startup. Eventually, I landed a position at a local government agency, earning almost double what I made before. The agency, well, specifically our county office, was notorious for insane turnover, awful coworkers, and an overall toxic and exhausting environment.
Add to that the clients, who are often some of the most difficult people in the community, and the job drained every ounce of energy a person could have. But for a young guy, the salary felt good enough to deal with the pain. So when they offered me the job, I accepted, as cheerfully as someone can when walking straight into hell. I started in May. I worked my butt off from day one. I read the entire 350-page manual in my free time. I took on unpaid side tasks. I helped coworkers, even if it meant working more hours than I could handle. Sometimes I'd show up at 8 a.m. and wouldn't leave until 2 or 3 in the morning. I once had to cancel a long-planned date with my serious girlfriend because they called me in unexpectedly, and I stayed until late at night. I consistently worked far more than I wanted, but they just kept piling on work because I was performing well. My supervisor would always say things like, "That's just how things are here. It's for the good of the agency. The best employees are the ones who sacrifice themselves for everyone else." Outside of work, she seemed like a perfectly pleasant woman, but a small part of me grew more irritated every time I heard those lines. By June, only 1 month in, I was already looking for escape routes, just like all the talented people who quit before me. I reached out to an MBA program that had always interested me, and they told me I should apply. Within a couple of days, the program director contacted me personally and scheduled an interview. The interview lasted 15 minutes. He thanked me for my time and ended the Skype call. Before the week was over, I received an email offering me a full-ride scholarship plus a small but very useful monthly stipend as long as I agreed to work as a graduate assistant for 20 hours a week during semesters. I was thrilled and signed the acceptance document immediately. Just like that, in under a week, I went from drowning under a growing mountain of stress to becoming a future graduate student. The program began in January, which gave me about 5 months. I decided I'd stick it out at the agency, save as much money as possible, and then leave in December. Since I'm an honest person, I told my supervisor about my plans and explained that I'd be resigning at the end of December because I'd been given an incredible MBA opportunity. She congratulated me, said she was glad for my success, and told me she'd think about the next steps and get back to me soon. A couple of weeks passed, each day draining me a little more, like a river slowly eroding its banks. Finally, she called me into her office for a meeting. She told me I could stay with the agency, but only if I agreed to move into what she called a contract position. She said they needed me to vacate my current role so they could open it as an official vacancy and prepare it for a new hire.
She insisted that all of this was for the good of the agency, and that someone as principled, hardworking, and ethical as me would agree to such terms, and should agree to them. Remember those words, because they'll matter later. I asked what exactly would change, and she gave me a vague summary. That wasn't enough for me. She wasn't a terrible manager, but life taught me one rule: never sign anything unless you've personally read every line. So I requested a week to decide and asked for all documents detailing every change, benefits, duties, restrictions, everything. She promised to bring the paperwork the next day. And that's where the malicious compliance began. The following afternoon, she handed me 12 double-sided pages packed with text. Every page was filled with size 10 times New Roman, the kind of formatting that makes sentences blend into each other like wet ink. Even the most dedicated reader would fall asleep halfway through it. I read the packet that night, and with each page, my mood sank lower and lower. I was losing nearly every benefit except my accumulated overtime. My title was being reduced. Several privileges I had earned were simply gone. But halfway through, something changed. I suddenly sat up. I had found a tiny clause buried deep in legal sludge, stating that under this new contract, I could not work more than 40 hours a week. I was forbidden from performing many of the tasks I had grown to despise. I was required to do only the duties explicitly listed in the new job description. In other words, once I hit 40 hours, I was done. No exceptions, no pitching in, no being a team player. As I reread that microscopic sentence, a slow smile crept across my face. At first it was small, the polite "I'm pretending to be interested" smile you give on a bad date. Then it grew wider and wider until I probably resembled the Grinch plotting to steal Christmas. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was so energized I barely slept. The next morning, I walked into the office prepared. My manager was delighted to hear I accepted the new contract. Of course, she had no idea how happy I actually was. After I handed her the signed pages, she began explaining what she wanted me to handle over the next 2 weeks. I quickly, but calmly, told her I wouldn't be able to do that. I explained that as a responsible and ethical employee, I must strictly follow my new contract. She stared at me, confusion mixing with anger, as I laid it all out. I could no longer perform several tasks I used to because the contract prohibited them. I could not work overtime under any circumstances unless my hours were officially recorded. Once I reached 40 hours, I was required to stop working immediately and go home. After-hours calls, emails, and messages, not allowed. Everything would have to wait until Monday at 8 a.m. I was no longer permitted to take on call shifts. They'd need to find someone else fast, which would be, challenging. I couldn't help coworkers the way I used to because I no longer had the authority, the time, or the legal right to do so. Her stare could have melted steel, and the longer I continued, the more intense it became. When I left her office, which was now seconds away from metaphorically exploding, I sat down and began drafting an email. Here's the thing. In my own position, you needed certified training before you were legally allowed to sign off on cases and documents. If you hadn't completed that training and anyone found out, attorneys could tear the agency apart. Because of the county's incompetence, I never got that training, yet they still had me doing a job from day one. Every request I made about it had been ignored. So I wrote the email. I addressed it to my former supervisor, the office manager, and the regional director, the usual trio who had ignored me before. But this time, I added 2 more recipients in the blind copy, the big boss from the central office and her even bigger boss. Networking and politeness, I practice them religiously. They pay off when it counts. I asked very respectfully when I would finally receive the mandatory training I had been promised months ago. I explained that I had been handling cases without the required certification and would have to continue doing so until my responsibilities were reassigned. 2 minutes later, I received a reply from the highest-ranking official in the entire state agency.
She expressed that she was saddened and disturbed to hear about my situation and promised she would personally ensure I completed the required training. She was also shocked that I had essentially been forced to accept a demotion just to keep my job. As a result, she guaranteed that under no circumstances would my salary be reduced. The most amusing part? I was being trained for a position I no longer held, so the whole exercise was absurd in itself. On top of that, the standard training sessions weren't even being offered at that time. This meant I had to travel to the state capitol for a special session, just me and a handful of other lucky employees from across the state. Since the capital was far from home, company policy required that they provide a hotel room and a reasonable per diem. Thanks to some late-night research, I discovered that the city was hosting major events at the same time. I reported this to the big boss from the central office, explaining that no reasonably priced rooms were available near the training site. That would have been a contract violation on their part. Now it was their responsibility to find accommodation for me. In the end, the big boss exercised her authority and booked me a luxury suite in a stunning hotel, a pinnacle of cosmopolitan glamour, at least by local standards. The following week, I went to the week-long training. Let me remind you, this was for a job I no longer held and had no intention of ever doing again. My motivation, naturally, was minimal. The entire week, I did nothing but enjoy the luxury suite, expensive meals, and a couple of fun events in the city. In effect, I received a fully paid week off, even though I technically no longer had benefits. Returning to the office, I noticed that 2 coworkers from my department had quit, along with several others across the office. Chaos reigned largely because my letter from 2 weeks earlier had finally reached the central big boss. She had dug in, realized how badly our office was running, and acted swiftly and ruthlessly.
She dropped the full weight of bureaucratic authority, and the office felt it. Thanks to my new contract status, I was required to do only what was explicitly stated in it. Due to office incompetence, I could complete all my assigned tasks in about 20 hours a week. Plus, with the chaos caused by coworkers being sent to training, I was often tasked with simply transporting items from one location to another, sometimes across the state. I was slightly annoyed that this distracted me from core duties, but of course I was willing to sacrifice myself for the agency. It allowed me to easily rack up hours, sometimes working 16-hour days doing almost nothing and getting paid for the mileage. I would sit at my desk, headphones on, quietly watching the world burn around me. My office life until my departure was simple: handle minor tasks, then do absolutely nothing, browse the internet, watch YouTube, etc., until I reached 40 hours for the week. Often I could leave for the weekend by Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning. My life had shifted from a nightmare to a balanced existence. I began enjoying life again, spending time with my girlfriend, playing video games, and pursuing hobbies. I even used accumulated overtime to pay for a Caribbean cruise in November, which I was thrilled about because many childhood friends were going. My once formidable, now comparatively humble boss quietly wished me a good vacation and expressed hope I'd return. I joked that I couldn't promise anything. I enjoyed a week in warm waters and on the islands, experienced the pleasure of cruising like a pro, and reflected on what I wanted from life, work, and myself. Back at the office on Monday, I waited for my boss. When she entered, she already knew what I would say. I could see the joy drain from her face, leaving only a hollow shell. I informed her that, unfortunately, I couldn't stay until the end of December. I needed to leave 2 weeks early due to unforeseen complications in my transition to the MBA program. She replied with a weary, strained tone, "I understand. Thank you for your 6 months of service. I'm sorry to see you go." And that's how I turned a demotion into a fully paid week off and nearly 4 months of easy work. Moreover, I turned her words against her, becoming the model ethical employee, strictly following my contract while creating office chaos for weeks as management scrambled to handle the attention from the central leadership. Recently, I discussed this story with my current girlfriend, whom I met at that very agency. She's amazing and makes me happier than I've ever been. I'm fairly certain I'll propose eventually. She mentioned that both my previous bosses, as well as the office manager and regional director, were eventually removed from their positions, enforced by the central big boss, shortly after my departure. For those curious, I completed my MBA program with a perfect GPA, 4.0. Next week, I have an interview for a new position. Looks like I'll nearly double my income again.
My wife cheated on me with her gym trainer, and when she asked for a divorce, she demanded half of everything we owned. What she didn't know was that our house and all our savings were legally registered under my father's name. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. I'm 35, and I've been working as an accountant at a local firm for almost a decade. I like to think of myself as a practical, level-headed guy. Maybe that's why I'm managing to stay calm through all this. My wife, Katie, is 33. We'd been together for about 5 years, married for 2, no kids, and honestly, looking back now, that might have been a blessing. After the wedding, she stopped working. She used to be in marketing, but said she wanted a break to focus on us. I didn't argue. I earned enough to support both of us and assumed it was temporary. We had a house, a comfortable amount of savings, nothing extravagant, but a stable, normal life. Then, gradually, something changed. Katie grew distant. She stayed out longer with friends or at the gym, avoided affection, got irritated whenever I asked what was wrong. At first, I chalked it up to stress, but the feeling that something was off kept growing, and unfortunately, I was right. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen without thinking. A message from someone named Derek. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby." I opened the chat. The messages were explicit, romantic, full of plans that didn't include me. She had been seeing him for months. I just stared at the screen, numb. This was the woman I trusted, the person I built a life with. But instead of anger, all I felt was emptiness. Maybe shock. Maybe my rational side kicking in. When Katie came out of the bathroom, I handed her the phone and calmly asked her to explain.
She tried to brush it off at first. "It's just a joke, it's nothing serious." But when I read a few messages aloud, she realized lying was pointless. And then, without hesitation, she said, "I want a divorce." No apology, no tears, no guilt. Just cold, matter of fact. She admitted she'd been seeing Derek for a while and wasn't happy in our marriage anymore. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She was leaving for him. But what stunned me wasn't even the affair. It was what she said next. She wanted half of everything we owned. She even claimed she deserved it because she gave up her career for our relationship. Her entitlement was unbelievable, but I stayed calm, not because I'm some saint, but because I knew something she didn't. I agreed to the divorce, told her I wouldn't fight it. She looked shocked, probably expecting shouting or some dramatic meltdown, but I wasn't giving her that satisfaction. Here's what Katie never knew. Almost everything we owned was legally registered under my father's name. Years ago, when I first started earning good money, my dad suggested registering major assets like the house and most of my investments under him. He said it would protect me if anything ever went wrong, debts, lawsuits, or, well, exactly this. I didn't think much of it then. It just seemed like smart financial planning. So when Katie tried to demand half of our estate, she had no idea that legally I owned almost nothing. My car, a modest bank account, and a few personal items. That was it. The house belonged to my father. Most of the savings were on his accounts, too. To avoid a messy legal fight, I suggested mediation. She agreed, convinced she'd walk away with a small fortune. She had no clue that everything had been arranged years before she even met me. When the divorce process started, I told my dad everything. He wasn't thrilled, but he understood. We spoke with a lawyer to make sure all paperwork was solid, and it was flawless. Katie could demand all she wanted, but there was nothing for her to take. She went in expecting half a house and a pile of savings. She came out realizing I barely owned anything at all.
She wasted no time hiring an aggressive attorney, the kind of shark who promises to tear everything out of the other party. I hired a calm but experienced lawyer who specialized in cases with complicated financial structures. I didn't want a dramatic courtroom battle, but I also wasn't going to let Katie and her lawyer pressure me. The first step of the divorce was financial disclosure, and as you can probably guess, that did not go the way Katie expected. I provided all the documents the law required, but once she saw how little was actually in my name, her attorney stopped smirking. They both looked confused, maybe even suspicious, but they couldn't argue with the paperwork. Everything I submitted was true. There were no hidden accounts or secret assets. Katie snapped right there in the meeting, shouting that I was lying, calling me names. But I had shown everything I legally owned. After a few minutes of her screaming, I simply stood up and told her we could continue once she calmed down. And now I'm here, unsure whether I did the right thing. I agreed to give her half of everything, knowing she wouldn't get anywhere close to what she imagined. Update 1. Things begin to escalate. Right after the asset disclosure, Katie completely lost her composure. She was convinced I was hiding something. Her attorney wasn't much better. The look on their faces when they saw the tiny numbers next to my name was priceless. Within days, they demanded a deeper investigation. Katie kept repeating, "Where's the money? The house, the investments, everything we built?" She truly believed I had some giant stash of assets hidden somewhere. Her attorney hired a forensic accountant to dig through every transaction. I was a little nervous, not because I was guilty of anything, but because I knew this would drag the divorce out even longer. After talking with my attorney and reviewing all documents again, it became clear they weren't going to find anything. Everything I submitted was 100% accurate. There wasn't a single trail that could lead back to the assets under my father's name. As the investigation continued, Katie became more irritated and desperate. She was used to getting what she wanted, and this time there was nothing to take. The realization that she'd walk away with almost nothing was unbearable for her.
Her next move was to claim she had made a significant contribution to my career and our lifestyle. She insisted that by staying home and managing the house, I gave her the freedom to focus on work and succeed. Sure, sometimes her help made daily life easier, but I'm not the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I'm a mid-level accountant. My income has been steady for years. There was no magical rise she could take credit for. But she kept pushing the narrative that she sacrificed her marketing career for me, even though she worked only briefly and quit by her own choice. Her attorney brought this up again and again, trying to frame me as someone who exploited her sacrifice. But there was no evidence to support that claim.
At one point, they even tried dragging my parents into the process. Katie wanted to prove that they had secretly given me money or helped me hide assets. And that was the moment I finally lost my patience. My parents had nothing to do with any of this, and involving them was a cheap, disgusting move. Thankfully, my lawyer shut that down immediately, but it showed just how desperate Katie had become. As the divorce dragged on, she switched to a different tactic. If she couldn't get what she wanted in court, she tried to ruin my reputation instead. She began telling everyone in our social circle that I had been hiding money from her for years, that I was financially abusive. I couldn't believe the lies she was spreading. Mutual friends told me she constantly complained that I was leaving her with nothing and had deceived her into thinking we had more than we actually did. She even went on social media, posting vague but obvious jabs about narcissist and betrayal. Some people sided with her. There are always those who automatically believe whoever cries the loudest. But most of our real friends knew the truth. They understood I wasn't capable of what she accused me of. Watching her drag my name through the mud just because things didn't go her way was painful. But I tried not to let it get to me. I knew the truth, and so did the people who mattered. Meanwhile, I focused on protecting myself. My lawyer and I stayed in constant communication, collecting every message, every demand, every attempt she made to twist the story. If things went to court, I wanted everything documented. I also gathered proof of her affair with Derek. Screenshots, their photos together, even statements from a couple of her friends who knew about the cheating. I didn't want to humiliate her, I just wanted the truth to be clear. On top of that, I prepared for what I knew was coming. Once it became obvious she wouldn't be getting half of everything, the real ugliness would begin. I kept my distance, focused on work, and handled the legal side quietly and carefully. Meanwhile, Derek's attitude started changing too. When Katie first told him she wanted to leave me for him, he seemed enthusiastic. They had some fantasy about starting a new life together. But as soon as the divorce turned into a nightmare, Derek began pulling away. Apparently, he wasn't as in love as she thought. From what I heard, he panicked when he realized being with her meant dealing with her financial mess. Rumors started spreading that he was losing clients at the gym because of the scandal. Nobody wants a trainer who sleeps with married women. He's now avoiding her, and she's finally beginning to realize this wasn't a fairy tale, but a delusion. Sometimes I almost feel sorry for her. Then I remember everything she did, and the sympathy disappears. I have mixed emotions. On one hand, yes, I'm relieved. I protected my money, and she's not walking away with what she expected. On the other hand, it's sad. This was still my marriage. I once loved her and believed we had a future. Watching it fall apart hurts, even if I know this outcome is for the best. Update 2. Things get even crazier. Since my last update, everything spiraled even further. Katie is in full-blown panic mode, and it's showing in the worst ways. She finally accepted that she won't get the payout she was counting on. So now she's trying to turn my life into hell. Her latest stunt is threatening to destroy my career. She told me outright that if I didn't be more generous, she would make sure everyone in my office found out what a monster I supposedly am. At first, I wasn't even sure what she meant, until she started showing up at my office unannounced. The first time, she pretended she just wanted to talk. But when I made it clear there was nothing left to discuss, she snapped, raising her voice, saying things like, "I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." Luckily, I managed to get her out before it turned into a full-blown scene, but it's obvious she's becoming unpredictable. Back at her parents' house, where she's living now, things aren't great either.
From what I heard, they support her, but they're not thrilled with the situation. Once she realized she wasn't getting the jackpot she imagined, she moved in with them. And apparently tensions there are growing too.
At this point, even her own parents seem to be realizing that her victim act is nothing more than a performance. Mutual friends told me she's been snapping at everyone, fighting with her family, and acting like she's on the verge of a breakdown. The legal side of everything has also become more chaotic. Katie's lawyer is desperately trying to dig up anything they can use against me. They even filed a motion to subpoena my parents and demand their financial records, despite my attorney repeatedly explaining that my parents' assets have nothing to do with this divorce. It's obvious they're trying to rattle me, but it isn't working. Her legal team has also requested statements from my coworkers, hoping to find hidden income or under-the-table payments. They're grabbing at straws, but they keep coming up empty. Every time we shut down one of their requests, another one pops up. The whole thing feels like an endless chess match. They try to counter every move I make, but so far I've managed to stay one step ahead thanks to my attorney, and thanks to the financial safeguards my father put in place years ago. Still, it's exhausting, and I'm not sure how much longer I can deal with this before the case finally goes to trial. As for mediation, we've attempted it twice, and both times were disasters. The first session lasted maybe 20 minutes. Katie refused to back down from demanding half the house and half the savings. My lawyer calmly stated the facts. The house is legally in my father's name, and the savings aren't remotely what she imagines. She didn't want to hear it. She stormed out, accused everyone of lying, and claimed the mediator was biased. The second attempt wasn't any better. This time she arrived with an absurd list of demands: full ownership of the house, half of all assets, which barely exist, and alimony for at least 5 years. When my attorney explained, again, that none of this was legally justified, she lost control completely. She screamed that she gave up everything for me and that I was abandoning her with nothing. I sat there trying to stay composed, but inside I was boiling. She was the one who cheated, the one who walked away, and yet she paints me as the villain who destroyed her life? After that meeting, it became obvious. This divorce would only end in court. Meanwhile, Katie has been borrowing money from family and friends to keep paying her attorney. Clearly, she didn't expect the divorce to drag on this long, and now she's running out of resources. I honestly don't know how she plans to keep funding her overly aggressive lawyer, but that's no longer my problem. The more desperate she gets, the more unstable her behavior becomes. Friends told me she barely leaves the house and constantly complains to anyone who will listen that I've ruined her life. Even her own friends are starting to distance themselves. They're tired of the endless drama and the way she keeps replaying the victim narrative. It's clear that everything she hoped to gain from this divorce is slipping through her fingers. All the while, I'm doing my best to stay calm and strategic. Every accusation she throws at me, I counter with documentation. Every financial record they request, I provide. I have nothing to hide. My lawyer makes sure we follow the law down to the last detail, something I can't say for Katie's side. I've also been protecting my parents' privacy as much as possible. Her attempts to drag them into this mess make my blood boil, but thankfully there are legal safeguards that prevent her from getting access to their financial documents. The fact that she even tried shows just how desperate she's become. She seems convinced that if she digs deep enough, she'll uncover some secret fortune. There is nothing to find. Update 3. The day of the hearing finally arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was intense. Katie testified first. She immediately went on the offensive, insisting I had been hiding assets for years. She accused me of manipulating our finances, keeping money in secret accounts, and lying about our actual income. She played up the emotion, painting herself as someone who had been left with nothing after sacrificing her career for mine. At one point, she even cried on the stand, talking about how much she trusted me. But everything changed when my attorney presented the evidence of her affair with Derek. As soon as the messages, photos, and timeline of their relationship were revealed,
Everyone, the judge, the jury, and even the people in the back understood the truth. The sympathetic victim image she tried to build collapsed instantly. She tried to brush it off, saying it was a mistake and irrelevant to the divorce. But it was too late. Her credibility was gone, and it became obvious that her financial demands were driven purely by greed. When it was my turn to testify, I stayed calm and stuck strictly to the facts.
My attorney had prepared me well, so I knew that any emotional outburst or attempt to justify myself would only hurt the case. I calmly explained how my assets had been placed under my father's ownership years before, how I fully disclosed every financial detail, and how I tried to resolve everything amicably through mediation. I also described her threats, her unstable behavior, and the smear campaign she had been running against me. My lawyer presented documentation refuting each of her accusations, both the legal claims and the lies she spread publicly, proving that none of it had any real foundation. We laid everything out clearly. The house belongs to my father, our savings are modest, and there is no secret stash of money she could claim a share of. The judge seemed to appreciate my composure and straightforwardness. I didn't try to paint Katie as a villain, but I also didn't sugarcoat anything. The facts spoke for themselves. Several key witnesses testified, and their statements finally put everything in its proper place. My father testified first. He explained the financial arrangement we put in place years ago, how the house is legally in his name, how the investments are under his control, and that everything was structured for long-term financial protection. He made it clear those assets are his, not mine, and that Katie has no legal claim to them. Next, one of my coworkers testified. Katie's legal team tried to suggest I'd been getting under-the-table payments or hidden bonuses, but he shut that down immediately. He confirmed that I earn a standard salary and have no secret income. His testimony was crucial, proving her accusations were baseless. The judge saw that there was no conspiracy, just a straightforward, transparent financial structure that Katie never bothered to understand. After several days of testimony and legal arguments, the judge finally delivered the ruling. Hearing that the decision was in my favor felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. Katie's demands for half the house and half our savings were completely denied. The judge ruled that since the house and most of the assets belonged to my father, Katie has no right to them. The only thing she was awarded was minimal, short-term alimony, barely enough to cover a fraction of her legal fees, let alone the lifestyle she imagined. He also specifically noted that her affair and her lack of contribution to our finances influenced the decision. He saw right through her attempts to play the victim and issued a fair verdict. When he finished reading the decision, I felt an enormous sense of relief. Months of stress, constant accusations, the fear of losing everything, all of it vanished in an instant. Legally, I was finally free. Katie, on the other hand, didn't take the ruling well. The moment the judge concluded, she burst into tears, yelling that the system was unfair and that I had stolen what she deserved. She ran out of the courtroom, leaving her lawyer looking stunned. I'm not sure what she expected, but it was obvious she wasn't ready for a loss. As for me, I felt only relief. I thanked my attorney, who did an incredible job, and walked out of the courthouse. My phone was exploding with messages, friends and family congratulating me. The news spread quickly, and soon everyone in our community knew how the case ended. It felt good knowing the truth had finally come out, and I could start moving on. But Katie didn't stop. Right outside the courthouse, she caused another scene in front of a small crowd, shouting that I manipulated the system and that she would appeal. The problem is, she has no money for an appeal. Her attorney had already hinted that her funds were gone, and now, from what I've heard, she's still borrowing from relatives and friends just to stay afloat. I'm endlessly grateful to my father for his foresight. I can't even imagine the mess I'd be in without his planning.
And I'm grateful to my family, friends, and colleagues who didn't abandon me when she tried to destroy my reputation. Now, for the first time in a long while, I'm looking toward the future with hope. I know it will take time to recover, emotionally and financially, but I'm ready to rebuild. This whole experience taught me a lot, and I won't make the same mistakes again. Right now, all I want is to return to a normal life and finally enjoy some peace.